Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. The Chinjao family had also arrived, so all forces were assembled. From his former captains, Hancock, Foxy, Bellamy, Bartolomeo, Wiper, Page 1, Greg, Dory, and Brogy. These were the captains with combat ships, while the other members who trained in Skypia for 1 year were part of the espionage division of the current Baroque works. Lola was a member as a scientist, not involved in fighting, but was responsible for creating the special metal to replenish the forces of all allied nations and Luffy's plans. Now, with this new recruitment, Luffy had attack captains such as Ideo, Cavendish, Kairos, Tesoro, Orlumbus, Hadruden, Leo, Sai, and other minor captains. There were 20 pirate captains in total. It may not be as many as Whitebeard's over 40, but it was still enough to take on that fleet if the old men were still alive. Viola was his ally from Dressrosa, not an attack captain. The same could be said of her father, as they would remain taking care of Dressrosa. But Kairos would join the fight since his daughter was still an official member with great power, and he wanted to keep looking after her. Elizabello too was also an ally who would look after the Kingdom of Prudence as Luffy's ally. Some ships had arrived, but some, like Hadruden's companions, had not, as they had forgotten about his existence due to sugar. During this time, Luffy had also convinced Leo, one of Dressrosa's fairies, to join the fight with him. He was about to fight in Wano and could have Inu Arashi and Neko Memoshi in his crew once he won the war and liberated Wano. He looked at everyone there, along with their crews watching him from atop a rock while his main crew observed their captain dealing with the maritime force of over 20,000 pirates that were part of his fleet. People, champions of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet. Luffy began, his voice easily reaching everyone. I am here to say that if you're here, you trust my vision of the world and what I seek for the sea, because this is a path of no return for everyone present. From now on, our fight won't just be against pirates or the Navy, but the government will see us as a real threat, perhaps greater than the 4 emperors themselves. And do you know why? Luffy spoke, breaking into a smile. Because they fear us. He said as everyone looked at him, dozens of thousands of eyes staring at him, trying to etch each of his words into their minds during this speech. Luffy was making history because today would be the first time the world would see his fleet in its entirety. After the events a year ago, he was known as the 5th Emperor. The emperor without territory and without a fleet. However, what they couldn't imagine was that since the moment he gained consciousness in that barrel in East Blue, Luffy had been working swiftly to pave his way to the top of this world. He had 2 powerful devil fruits along with his haki, yet he knew he couldn't do everything alone and had been seeking as many key allies as possible. In the end, everything I've been working on in this world since I regained my memories almost 2 years ago, this is my result. Luffy remarked as he looked at the fleet. This was the fruit of his labor. But it was only the beginning. And from this day forward, we will shake the new world and destroy its entire power pyramid. But that's not enough. We will find the One Piece, but even that's not enough. We will shake the whole world, and even if everyone turns against us, we will stand firm and fight tooth and nail to prove that we are unstoppable. Luffy exclaimed with a wide grin. Oh. The crowd was captivated by his charisma, despite the simplicity of his speech. Thousands of minds imagined themselves being feared by the entire world. Anyway, let's start the training. I hope you're ready. Those who are already part of the crew will go to the island of dinosaurs to train with them. My companions will help you in the training. Those who are joining now can stay here. This is the island of animals, and we will begin your training immediately. He spoke as the 2 groups separated, with Zoro, Frankie, Jinbai, and Yamato overseeing the training of the older members while Luffy stayed to train the newcomers in his own way. He then began explaining how he would do it. And everyone's eyes shone with anticipation as various animals were summoned from the forest, approaching with more fear of Luffy than genuine intent to fight the newcomers. Many who didn't know his methods were eager to undergo training under one of the most powerful pirate crews in the world. However, reality was different, as all of them now found themselves sprawled on the ground. Thousands of bodies lay scattered on the ground in that training area, with groans and the cracking of bones audible as the animals retreated. Even the strongest members, capable of handling one of those beasts using hockey, were overwhelmed by multiple opponents, losing the fights and getting beaten, as was the case with Tesoro and Shinjao, who, despite their strength, were now lying buried in the ground. Luffy stood there, arms crossed and one eyebrow raised, watching the entire scene. Various animals had charged at them from the forest, and the confidence they had before was lost as they saw the enormous creatures not wasting a moment to start thrashing thousands of people. Luffy snorted. "It's the first day, and you're all on the ground?" he asked with a dissatisfied look, staring at all the men and women who dared to enter his training. "You can go." What a disappointment. Luffy spoke to the animals, who awaited his orders. They all nodded and returned to the forest. "You can't be serious." The men in front of him muttered as they heard his words, exhausted and defeated. "Of course I'm serious," Luffy replied firmly. "It's no accident that you're part of this crew, but it's disappointing to see that we haven't even started our real training yet. We were just warming up." Luffy continued. "Warming up? How can you be so ruthless?" Bakura, lying on the ground, murmured from the other side, not understanding how he could be so harsh, even with her, who was his lover. Meanwhile, nearby, Vivi was holding Sinbad in her arms, observing the commotion. She merely sighed as her son shifted in her embrace, raising his hands as if reaching for his father, laughing at Luffy's words despite not comprehending them. "He's not going to stop, is he?" Vivi commented, recalling how demanding Luffy had been, even with her. The first days on the ship were horrible. He expected her to grow stronger, but in his own way, and he was not the knight she had imagined. He was a harsh man who only sought satisfactory results in training. "Well, it reminds me of the old days. We hardly got any rest either," Nojiko said, approaching Vivi while looking at the boy in her arms. "It's true. Luffy's brother, that Sabo, also went for training with the other members on the Dinosaur Island. At least he doesn't have Luffy as his trainer," Vivi observed as she watched Nojiko running her fingers through her son's hair. "Are you thinking your son will be like mine?" Vivi asked with a playful tone. "A little, but my hair is darker," Nojiko commented with a smile. "And aren't you planning to have one?" Vivi inquired. "Not now. I'm scared," Nojiko murmured, and Vivi nodded. She had been scared too when she got pregnant, worrying whether her boy would be safe, but the moment she saw him, she fell in love with her son and didn't regret giving birth. She just wanted to protect him from that moment on for the rest of her life, or at least until he could take care of himself like his father. "Well," Luffy began to speak again, ignoring the protesting looks and cries for mercy. He was always like this when starting training, but since it was their first day, he would give them a chance to breathe. "You're dismissed for today, so rest up. Tomorrow, we'll resume training, and you'd better be ready," Luffy said as he walked back to his women. "Call Reiju to bathe them in recovery flames. I'm going back to Dressrosa. This training ended up being a waste of time," Luffy instructed. "You should go easier on them, Luffy," Nojiko murmured. "It's better for them to take a beating here than to die on the battlefield," Luffy replied, not yielding on his special method. His son wanted to be held, but Luffy just ruffled his hair. "Not now, Sinbad. Daddy needs to handle a lot of things on his own," he said and turned to his wives. "Anyway, I'm going to see my prisoner now. Goodbye," Luffy stated before disappearing, leaving the girls to sigh before calling Reiju on the Dendenmushi, surprised that she already had to help 10,000 beaten people. Luffy landed in his current base area with a chair and made his way towards Fujitora. While walking in that corridor, he was surprised by a rebellious girl. "You! Get me out of here! I don't want to be here anymore." Luffy looked at Sugar in one of the cells. "Sugar," Luffy commented calmly. "You're Monkey D. Luffy. Please, get me out of here," she exclaimed, and Luffy knew how deceitful she was and shook his head. "I'll deal with you later. Even with a childlike appearance, you're over 20 years old, so don't try to fool me with some act. I'll see you later." Luffy completely ignored her and continued on to the next cells. Lamy had left her there after getting annoyed with the girl, which was why Luffy had been surprised to see her. Fujitora was keeping his breathing controlled, seeming to be meditating when Luffy appeared in front of him. He merely lifted his head slightly, as if looking into Luffy's eyes, despite being blind. "Hello, Fujitora. How about we step outside and have a chat? After all, Dressrosa was your home for a while," Luffy said as he unlocked the cell. Chapter 430, Talking with Fujitora. "Monkey D. Luffy," Fujitora murmured, feeling the powerful presence of Luffy before him as he unlocked his cell with a snap. "Let's go outside, we have some things to discuss," Fujitora, Luffy said, and the man, unable to resist, stood up from his meditative position, beginning to leave the cell to follow Luffy, though his hands remained bound in sea stone. And so, they stepped outside the prison in silence. As the sun hit his face, the Admiral looked out over Dressrosa, appearing almost the same as when he was first detained. Outside the kingdom, he could sense islands as large as Dressrosa surrounding it, either on a sea or floating in the air. So, this is what the power of the levitating float fruit model, flying human devil fruit can do? He asked, somewhat impressed by the sight. Even though he couldn't see, he perceived shapes in the air and felt the presence of each island around him through his haki. Yes. It's the power of one of my crew members. Luffy replied with a smile. Fujitora said nothing, though he was visibly intrigued. Obviously, the gravity fruit user was interested in the levitation power, having heard of Shiki in the past, though he had never had to face him. Let's go. Luffy commented, leaving the prison as they passed a few guards posted by King Riku to watch over the place. They greeted Luffy and allowed him to pass without resistance. Fujitora merely followed in silence as they walked past the prison walls and into the city. Luffy offered no further comments, and they proceeded forward. As they walked, they saw the townspeople busy with their activities, rebuilding their homes, clearing stones and debris from both the streets and private properties. A consequence of the battle that took place when the first Straw Hats arrived in the kingdom. They continued their reconstruction while Luffy and Fujitora heard the sounds of nails and hammers. Dad. I brought your lunch. Let's eat with Mom, and then I'll help you finish our house. A boy ran up to a man hammering nails. Darling, I brought these little buns for you. Thank you, my love. At another house, a man was sawing a wooden beam while his wife approached. They seemed newly married, perhaps due to the absence, as either the man or the woman had once been transformed into toys. Now, they could reclaim their lives with those who had forgotten them, finally able to be close to the people they loved again. This scene had become commonplace as they continued to walk through the city. Children, parents, spouses. All appeared happy with their families, even with their homes in ruins, as they continued to rebuild, finding joy in being with the ones they loved. Some noticed Luffy strolling calmly through the streets, surprised to see the four emperors so casually accompanied by a marine admiral. In silence, some greeted him with nods, while others waved. Captain of the Straw Hat Pirates. Thank you for what your crew did for Dressrosa. Lord Luffy, we are eternally grateful for the freedom you brought us. Dressrosa was a prison until you appeared. Thank you for ending Doflamingo and his family. People continued to exclaim as they passed through those streets. Of course, not everyone shared this sentiment. Some looked at Luffy with fear, but they were in the minority. He knew the world was as it was, that one could never please everyone, and accepted that he would always be seen as both a villain and a hero. Many would still fear him, but it didn't change the fact that most were grateful. Luffy calmly nodded in acknowledgement to those who greeted him. Some glanced at Fujitora with anger and disgust. How could the Marines let us suffer for years? How did you allow Dressrosa to reach this state? You were supposed to uphold justice. They hurled these words at the blind man. They sought an outlet for their frustrations, knowing it was only due to the government's interest in the 7 warlords of the seas system that Doflamingo's power had solidified, leaving the suffering people to endure in silence. Doflamingo was killed over a year ago. But it doesn't change the fact that everything started because of him and the government, which left Dressrosa in his hands after his coup. Where were you when my wife turned into a toy? A man exclaimed, pointing at Fujitora. My son became a cursed toy for years. I couldn't even remember him until the arrival of the Straw Hat Pirates. The man cried while his teenage son tried to calm him, and the father, full of indignation, pointed a finger at the admiral. Luffy felt empathy for Fujitora, now the target of that collective outburst. Don't blame yourself. Luffy said. Many of them think I'll be the same as Doflamingo. They fear me, too. That's just how people are. Always looking for someone to blame for their misfortune. It's all right. Perhaps I deserve it. Fujitora murmured. You had nothing to do with what happened here. You're someone who only recently joined the Marines. I don't think you should be responsible for something that happened years ago in this country. Luffy replied, reasonably. To him, there was no reason to blame Fujitora for it as these people were doing. But the moment I wear this mantle and carry this symbol. Fujitora answered with a certain determination. I represent the Marines. So, naturally, I will bear their complaints. You really are different from those other Marine idiots. Luffy said, smiling with respect. You're also different from what I expected. Fujitora admitted. Most people here see you as a hero. Someone who brought them freedom. Even though they are now under the flag of a pirate, you're bringing stability to this country for the moment. I can't deny that. Luffy acknowledged. But that was the work of my crew. I give credit to them, starting with Lamy, who defeated Doflamingo in the War of the Best. Even so, they are still under your command. Fujitora said thoughtfully. Though he saw Luffy as an enemy of justice, he recognized the difference in ideals. Your sense of justice is different from that of those who command you. Luffy commented, ignoring the people around them as he continued walking with Fujitora. What do you mean by that? Fujitora asked, raising his eyebrows, his eyes still closed. I foresee that soon the Marines will split into two factions. He said. One side will strictly follow the world government's orders, while the other will try to become independent. What makes you think that, Monkey D. Luffy? Fujitora asked, intrigued. Simple, the world government. Luffy replied as the atmosphere between them grew darker. Things are becoming unsustainable, and the government's corruption is becoming visible and will only become more exposed in the future. The 7 Warlords of the Seas program will likely be cancelled soon, but that doesn't change the fact that the government authorized countries like Dressrosa and Alabasta to be targets of pirates licensed to do as they please, allowing them to control their monarchies. We managed to stop Crocodile and Alabasta before anything truly happened. But here in Dressrosa, Doflamingo seized power and enslaved the country for years. He spoke in a somber tone at this part before continuing. Don't misunderstand me, Fujitora. I know you're against the 7 Warlords of the Seas program. You want, and even the Marines intend, to destroy it, which is a good thing. But that doesn't change the fact that the Marines are still the government's dog. And as soon as things become unsustainable, like now, the world government will try to destabilize its image along with the programs. However, that won't stop them from committing other atrocities. He said. Do you think the world government is a problem for the world? Fujitora raised an eyebrow, almost in an ironic tone. Luffy now sounded like a revolutionary, much like his father, which was also dangerous, though he fell into an even worse category for the people of this sea. Pirates like you and others spread terror across the New World. You might be right. The 4 emperors, for the most part, really are a problem for the world. At least Big Mom, Whitebeard, and Kaido are. But there are still those who seek only freedom on the seas, like Shanks. Although I still don't know all his intentions, he gave me this hat. Luffy held up his hat, showing it. When I was just a child, he placed his hopes on me, that one day I would be in the position I am now. So, I believe I haven't disappointed him. Soon, this hat will be passed on to someone else. Luffy paused before continuing. However, besides Shanks, there are still other good people. Whitebeard, for example, didn't cause problems for the world government or the Marines unless provoked. At least in his final days, all he wanted was to live and sail in peace until the end of his life. But even so, the world government and the Marines wanted to make a statement to the world about the Great Pirate Era, trying to end it by killing the strongest man in the world. I even understand the Marines' strategy, but the world government sold Whitebeard's image as a terrible pirate, someone destroying everything. He spoke before looking up at the sunny sky. The same can be said of Roger. Roger wasn't as evil as they claimed. He simply shook, at first, the gears of this world. What do you mean by that? Fujitora murmured, intrigued by Luffy's words. The gears of this world are about to be destroyed, and perhaps, just like Dressrosa, the whole world will be freed from the silent slavery imposed by the world government for over 800 years. It's time. A new era is coming, Fujitora. Either the world will prevail, and all those hidden demons, like Dressrosa, will be liberated, or people will continue to be silent slaves while the world government does whatever it pleases. You talk as if the world government is a monster, but it has established order in the world. Fujitora replied firmly. Despite not agreeing with everything, he still recognized that the world government brought benefits as well. Not as much as you might think. Luffy responded almost mockingly. It commits atrocities. Just because it seems to bring stability doesn't mean it's good. It just hides the truth. Every country has to pay tribute to the government, which it distributes to its divisions. Luffy began. But how much of that goes to the Marines? You know that most of that money goes to their precious celestial dragons. In my opinion, the government sees the world as a big pasture full of cows, and of course, they want control and order. After all, they need to milk the cows, and for what? So that those who live in merry joys can enjoy luxuries and enslave people, wanting the whole world to worship them as gods, but to me, they're nothing but pigs. Luffy spoke, fully aware of the weight of his words. Anyone who uttered such things would not only have their own head and their families on the line but would see their home island destroyed as well. However, Fujitora said nothing. Tell me, Fujitora, are you familiar with the hunt conducted by the celestial dragons years ago that seemed to end after the God Valley incident? Do you know what happened in Dressrosa? What happened in Alabasta? What happened in Ohara? As soon as scholars began to study the Void Century, the world government destroyed them. In truth, the world government fears the truth, And once it's revealed to the world, war will be inevitable. Roger was waiting for someone to lead the world in that war, someone who would liberate the people. Ironically, I might not even be the one he expected, but I intend to spark the beginning of this world's freedom. Luffy declared with conviction. After all, without freedom, people can't dream and find their happiness. Fujitora remained silent, taking it all in without comment. Luffy knew he didn't fully agree with his words but perhaps would understand them in time. Luffy was about to continue the conversation, but just then, his dendenmushi rang. Seeing it was Hancock, he picked it up, knowing she could speak to him in person, so a call must be urgent. Luffy, come quickly. Yuta's about to give birth. I've already called Lami. Hurry. Hancock exclaimed, her tone filled with urgency. He was surprised, but then a smile broke across his face. All right, I'll be there in a second. Luffy responded, hanging up the dendenmushi. He turned to Fujitora. Well, it looks like my sixth child is on the way. I can't miss this birth for anything. We'll leave our conversation for later, but one way or another, there'll come a time when you'll see the world government's atrocities. Don't forget about all the slaves trapped in Mary Ijos or any kingdom the world government may try to destroy in the future. Luffy paused, looking seriously at Fujitora, and added. I believe a new force will emerge within the Marines in time. A force that will fight for justice, and I truly hope you choose the right side, Fujitora. Fujitora nodded silently, reflecting on Luffy's words. In any case, you're permitted to walk around the city. You can find someone to help you arrange accommodations, but I can't release your sea-stone cuffs, even though I know you wouldn't cause harm to Dressrosa. It's just for security, after all, you're still a hostage, meant to keep this place safe from the world government for now. No offense. Luffy said. Fujitora remained silent, simply watching as Luffy disappeared a moment later. Chapter 431, A Traitor Among the Straw Hats. The cry of a baby boy finally echoed in a room in the middle of the castle. Yuta was lying on a bed, receiving treatment from Lami, who was also the doctor for other births. Lami could have delivered the baby from the mother's womb painlessly in an instant, using her Operation Fruit model, modification human power. But deep down, Yuta refused that. Luffy agreed, as he believed it was good for the mother to experience the pain of childbirth, as a kind of sacrifice for the baby. The pain was part of creating the solid bond, the strongest bond a woman could have with someone, her own child. At this moment, the child was already among them, and everyone looked at him as he filled the hall with his cries, showing he was a lively boy. Luffy watched with a wide smile as the midwives there helped clean the boy, wiping the blood from his body. Give him to me. Yuta requested in a weak tone as the women finished wrapping the child and brought him to his mother, placing him at her side. She looked at him with joy. He's so beautiful, Luffy. He looks just like you. Yuta murmured, gazing at the boy with black hair and red eyes. Luffy moved closer and gently touched his son's face with his fingers, softly caressing him. He really did take after my coloring. Our baby. Luffy said, smiling tenderly. How about a family photo? One of the women suggested, grabbing a dendenmushi to take a picture as Yuta moved to a clean bed. They ended up taking a family photo, both agreeing to capture this moment. I'm a bit scared to send this photo to Grandpa. But I can send it to Shanks. Luffy couldn't help but murmur. Luffy spent some time with the newborn and the mother, giving them special attention. Days passed, and in the end, Luffy ended up setting aside his duties for 3 whole days, trusting his crew to handle training the others. While he was absent, the training was gentler, lacking his usual intensity or the inhuman challenges Luffy would create. When he returned, everyone quickly realized how serious he was about maintaining discipline. Soon, they found themselves on the ground, bodies aching and bruised after Luffy ordered giant animals to attack them during that day's training as soon as he returned. Guys, I didn't expect I'd need to go so easy on you. How disappointing. Luffy remarked, seeing their exhaustion, clearly dissatisfied with their progress. Come on. It's been 4 days since training began, and I haven't seen any results. You're falling to the ground within minutes. That's not enough. It's ridiculous, and you should be ashamed of yourselves. Luffy exclaimed, now addressing the entire fleet. Luffy had the more fruit model, amplify human devil fruit to enhance his training at a beastly pace, intensifying the drills, demanding that everyone learn to master the 6 Marine 6 styles techniques and improve their haki. He wanted these 30 days to equate to a year of intense training, at least for the thousands of soldiers before him. He expected everyone to learn the basics, and the captains to master higher levels of haki skills. Thus, the official training began. Luffy spent most of the days focusing on everyone's improvement while also managing the administration of his fleet. He met with kings to discuss and organize trade among allied nations, even within Paradise. This movement also brought the Prudence Kingdom near Dressrosa a few days after Beppo received this mission from Luffy, where King Elizabello II explained the situation to everyone, seeking consensus that they now belong to the territory of the four emperors. But it wasn't just these allies on the move. Baroque Works also entered the New World at that moment to establish its information network. As soon as Luffy received the call from Galdino, he sent some of his crew members to escort the new Baroque Works ships to Dressrosa as they emerged from the depths, in case they ran into trouble. Finally, we made it past the Grand Line. Jabra exclaimed on one of the ships, which sailed alongside other Baroque Works leaders. In addition to Jabra, Galdino, Blueno, and Bentham were also on the ship. The other leaders whom Luffy had kept in Baroque Works remained in Paradise, while these ones were being transferred to the New World to operate in a far more powerful sea and attempt to establish their spy network here. It might be a bit harsh to pull the strongest ones out of Paradise, but Luffy had trained the other members who had already mastered the 6 styles, preparing them to face most threats on that side. Everything seemed in order, but Diabo was still agitated as he watched the red line behind the ships, towering into the sky, while his gaze rose upward. "Look at that, guys!" he exclaimed, raising both hands and flipping off Mary Jo eyes. "You bastards tried to capture us once. Now we're pirates, you bunch of idiots." He continued, as everyone looked at him and shook their heads, watching him curse the world nobles and the government with anger. "I'm going to lie down for a bit," Blueno said, heading inside the deck, while Galdino watched him leave with narrowed eyes. "What a boring guy," Jabra murmured, seeing his colleague leave without enjoying the New World sea on such a sunny day. Blueno entered his cabin and quickly headed to the bed, but instead, he pulled out a box, took out a communication device, and grabbed some papers he kept hidden, scanning them quickly before turning on the device. "Now that I'm close to Mary Jo eyes, I can inform them," Blueno murmured, revealing that he was a double agent, as the papers held all the information on the Straw Hats he'd gathered over the past year. He was about to turn on the device when the door suddenly burst open with someone kicking it in. Blueno looked up, stunned, his eyes widening at the sight of who stood there. "I remember when I found you in that bar in Water 7. It was obvious you were a double agent back then, and honestly, nothing has changed since then," Hugo commented as he approached, while Blueno took a step back, shocked. "You're here. How did you know?" Blueno murmured, incredulous. He realized that Hugo had always known of his betrayal. "We always knew. The captain always knew that you might be a traitor," Hugo said, leaving Blueno even more stunned. "If he knew, why did he keep me with them for a year?" Blueno asked, frowning. "The captain wanted to see if you'd change your loyalty. You've become much stronger than before, but don't be mistaken, Blueno. You were about to hand over our information to the world government, and that's unforgivable. Even for the captain, there are limits he can't tolerate." Hugo spoke with a cold, indifferent tone. Blueno didn't know how to respond as Hugo stepped even closer. "You know," Hugo continued. "The captain once told me that, even after recruiting you and Jabra, Diaga remain loyal. But you've always been in our sights. After all, when a dog grows up with a collar, it's hard for him to forget his original master. Isn't that how you treat the world government, Blueno?" he said calmly, moving closer, as Blueno found himself cornered, stepping back until he felt his back against the door. "The captain always said he wanted your fruit. That's why he kept you around. But he still wanted to give you a chance. And now you've lost it, so you're going to die." Hugo spoke with a tone that left no doubt. He was not joking, and he would follow through. Blueno, in a desperate move, quickly activated his devil fruit power, opening a door in space with high speed and trying to escape. However, just as he was about to pass through the opening, Hugo grabbed him, pulling him back. Blueno spun quickly, trying to break free as he felt his neck being squeezed and his body lifted. He used all his strength to struggle, but Hugo was far too strong. As he resisted, Blueno felt his hand begin to petrify, and a sharp pain spread through his neck until a snap ended his life. Hugo wasted no time, killing Blueno quickly as ordered by Luffy. There would be no forgiveness for this. Hugo simply sighed, but he didn't release the body, carrying it out of the cabin with Blueno's lifeless form draped over his shoulder, startling Bentham and Jabra, who were waiting outside. "What happened to him?" Jabra exclaimed in shock upon seeing Blueno's dead body. "He was about to pass our information to the world government." Galdino answered for Hugo, as he knew Luffy had asked him to keep an eye on Blueno. The captain's suspicion had proven true. "What? He was a traitor?" Jabra exclaimed again, even more stunned. "We had a traitor among us." "It can't be," Bentham murmured, crying both for the loss of his friend and the possibility of his betrayal. "Yes, the captain was right. Either way, we've eliminated that rotten apple, and now we must head to Dressrosa," Hugo said. Shortly after, another crew member appeared. Usopp, who had also been selected to escort the fleet, along with 2 other crew members. Then, the 10 ships set sail for Dressrosa along with Baroque works. Meanwhile, Luffy was monitoring the system at that moment with a den mushi in his hand. Understood. Just come back here. Luffy spoke in a tone void of emotion. He wasn't happy to have to kill someone from the fleet. But what choice did he have? The bastard was a traitor, and his gaze fell on the store system after Hugo confirmed and hung up the den mushi. The door fruit had now appeared in the inventory. Well, it seems that in the end, I'll have to use this power in a different way, he said, considering that the door fruit was too valuable to be wasted. He decided to keep it in his stock and choose a new user for it in the future, purchasing it at that very moment. Setting aside the matter of Blue Ano, Luffy turned his attention back to the fleet, which was training hard at that moment. Even though they were battered, everyone continued to push themselves to their limits, growing stronger each passing day. After all, each day was worth 10. Anyway, let's focus on training these guys. I'm sure they'll be unrecognizable when I'm done with them, Luffy said to himself, a smile spreading across his face. I heard you talking to yourself. Someone approached just then, and Luffy saw it was Yuta, carrying the baby in her arms. She looked like a woman fulfilled with the feeling of being a mother. Oh, come and sit with me, my love. Luffy invited, and she did so. He took the child into his arms as soon as she handed him over to sit, calling him Dex, lifting and playing with him. The boy seemed curious. Look, my son. This is Daddy's army. Soon, they'll make the whole world tremble, Luffy said, smiling as little Dex looked on with curiosity at all the fights taking place in the open space. And so, a month passed since that day, and that very scene looked vastly different from what it did in that moment. Chapter 432, Announce Our Journey to Wano to the World. Luffy was sitting in the same chair as a month ago, looking straight ahead as part of his daily routine, supervising his fleet's training once more. The open area was filled with monstrous, giant animals, even some gorillas wielding enormous swords, testing out the species he'd gathered from Mihawk's Island. He had brought in giraffes the size of giants, allowing them to train with each other, as they constantly learned and quickly caught up with the regular animals. Some could already use hockey, and soon they would surpass the dinosaurs, given that the intelligent gorillas had the potential to become far stronger than the other animals. The battle was complete chaos, with animals moving around on all sides, mostly fighting against humans, who appeared tiny in comparison. While Luffy's fleet began using the 6 styles to fight, some could now even use hockey. Luffy had turned 1 month of training into a year and a half. Using the powers of the more fruit model, Amplify Human Devil Fruit, he had significantly accelerated everyone's learning. Meanwhile, his main crew, along with the most powerful members of the fleet, were training directly with the dinosaurs, who had mastered hockey and could quickly become a greater challenge than any on the other islands. Luffy. Luffy heard his brother's voice as he approached. Sabo. Shouldn't you still be training in Sky P? Luffy asked, watching him drop from the sky to land in front of him. Sabo had mastered the most powerful 6 styles and trained with his mythical beasts over the past month. He had been training directly in Sky P with other recons, since Luffy kept their training hidden from the rest of the world, and Sky P was the only place where the econs could reveal themselves and fight one another. Sabo needed to train his beast, so Luffy had sent him there, allowing him to battle most of his main crew. Even Lucy fought Sabo, who had transformed into Ramu, and unexpectedly, Lucy emerged victorious. After all, she was immune to lightning and managed to defeat Sabo, even without her Joy Girl transformation, which remained dormant. Of course, Luffy tried to make her unleash her Gear 5, but the girl started running from her brother after being repeatedly beaten by him, as Luffy attempted to force her transformation, though he never succeeded. I got a call from your father. We need to meet up now that the Gathering of Kingdoms will take place at Mary Joy's, Sabo said with a more serious tone. Let me guess. You guys invaded the Holy City, Luffy said as Sabo sighed. Yes. We need to gather information on the government because there are some concerning rumors there, Sabo said. If you're talking about the empty throne, it hasn't been unoccupied for these 800 years, Luffy said. Sabo blinked, trying to process what Luffy had just said so abruptly. He remained like that for a moment, while Luffy seemed focused on watching the chaotic battle unfolding before him, with the terrain breaking apart within his view. His gaze then returned to the paralyzed Sabo. Are you okay? Maybe you should stay a few more days to rest, he commented, looking at his brother and slowly meeting his gaze. I'm sick? You just told me something absurd, and I'm the sick one, Sabo yelled, showing shark-like teeth as he shook Luffy with white eyes, while Luffy looked unfazed. Tell me, what you just said, is it true? How do you know this? Why didn't you tell me before? Sabo kept shaking Luffy, who swayed with the movement but maintained a calm expression. You didn't ask. Luffy shrugged as Sabo grew even angrier, pushing him until he finally stopped. Have you finally finished with this hysteria? Luffy asked, looking at him. You. Sabo murmured in frustration, but held back. Do you realize what you just told me? Are you certain of it? He asked, looking at him seriously. I'm telling the truth. There's someone the world government keeps hidden, someone above the celestial dragons and the five elders. The one who is the true king of the world and has controlled it since the Void Century. Imu. Luffy said with a serious tone. How do you know all of this? I mean, even Dragon wasn't certain about it, although he had some suspicions. Murmured Sabo, incredulous at Luffy's words. I can't say, but you should be careful in Mary Joy's. Luffy replied, knowing that Sabo would go regardless. However, he couldn't reveal more, as he needed Sabo to head toward Lulusa, forcing the world government to destroy the kingdom. Where his plans would begin. Sabo regained his usual composure, and they began to talk about other matters. It was in the middle of their conversation that Luffy's Den-Den-mushi rang. I'll wait for the others and start getting ready to leave, Luffy. Sabo informed him, and Luffy nodded. Alright. Stay at least tonight. I'm sure Lucy will be happy to have one last party with her brother. Luffy said, and Sabo nodded with a smile before leaving, while Luffy answered the Den-Den-mushi. Boss. That bird is approaching again. Came Enel's voice. That guy just doesn't know when to quit. Luffy muttered with a sigh. Should I kill him? I can do it in an instant. Enel offered, but Luffy shook his head. No. Leave him to me. Until I give the order, he isn't to be harmed, no matter how annoying and persistent he is. Luffy instructed, ensuring Enel wouldn't kill him at any moment. The Den-Den-mushi call ended, and Luffy sighed, scanning the space above the island before forming black wings on his back and blasting off like a rocket, leaving the island behind. Morgans was once again trying to infiltrate the Straw Hats' territory, frustrated by his lack of success over the past few months while they maintained a low profile. Meanwhile, in Wano, 2 Four Emperors were preparing to face the Straw Hats, yet no news had made it into the papers. Morgans was growing increasingly frustrated, eager to obtain some real information about them. After all, his newspapers were selling like never before, and the prospect of a Four Emperors war was unprecedented, anticipated for months. Not even the meeting of kings at Mary Joy's garnered as much attention worldwide, with everyone's eyes set beyond the red line, waiting to see how this conflict would unfold. But entering the territory was exceedingly difficult. Morgans had tried in numerous ways. First, he simply showed up, only to be expelled, told his presence couldn't be tolerated with so many spies already infiltrating the kingdoms. They didn't want their plans exposed to the world. He wasn't the only one seeking information, and it was clear that the world government was the most active, with 2 or 3 spies being caught daily, hoping one would slip past the Straw Hats' defenses. After being expelled, there wasn't much Morgans could do, but he tried various approaches. He posed as a merchant on a commercial ship, only to be intercepted by members of Luffy's main crew upon arrival at the island. He attempted to infiltrate with a pirate ship seeking to join the fleet, only to be turned away, told that joining Luffy's fleet wasn't done that way. Morgans even tried dressing as a woman, claiming to be Luffy's wife, only for Luffy himself to knock him so hard at the port that the journalist was sent flying to the horizon. Now he was trying from the air, attempting to get closer without being detected. Spotting some explosions in the distance, he was about to head that way when suddenly, Monkey D. Luffy appeared in front of him, wings flapping to halt himself, generating a gust of wind in the air. What? They already found me. Morgans exclaimed, fear flashing across his face as he found himself face to face with the 4 Emperors, who stood there, calmly staring at him. You really think you can get close without anyone here detecting you, Morgans? Luffy mocked, staring him down. Morgans gulped, remembering the last punch he took from this guy. It had left him bedridden for days. He was fast, but this man was a monster no one could control. Don't look at me like that, I'm not going to hit you today, at least as long as you don't cross this line. Luffy began, while Morgans remained silent. Suddenly, Luffy's face broke into a grin. Anyway. Morgans. I want you to make a publication about me. Luffy said. A publication? Morgans was surprised, watching the Straw Hat pirate hovering in front of him. Yes. It's time to make a move. I want you to announce that in the coming weeks, we'll be heading to Wano. Luffy said. Really? Morgans was astonished, pulling out his notebook to jot things down. Exactly. I want Big Mom and Kaido to know I'm coming. And I also want the world to know that we're finally going to bring those guys down. Luffy said calmly. This is huge, a major scoop. Morgans exclaimed, excited. Whatever. Can you do it? Luffy asked. Of course. Is there anything else I need to know? Maybe something like you all went through rigorous training last month and are now ready to face one of the world's strongest forces, who've joined together to destroy the Straw Hats? That sounds incredibly interesting. He began to shout. That wouldn't be wrong. We did go through some training. So, yes, you can say that. Just make sure Kaido and Big Mom know that we'll be setting out soon, and that they'll feel the wrath of the Straw Hats before they fall. Luffy said. That's it. I'll put it on the front page of tomorrow's newspaper. Morgans looked thrilled. One more thing. Can you publish this photo in the paper? I want the kid's grandfather to see her for the first time. Luffy said. This is. Morgans murmured, looking at the photo. Shanks' daughter, the red-haired, and my wife. Luffy said. Morgans already knew Luffy was married to this woman, but he had never imagined such a connection. Incredible. I'll do exactly that. These papers are going to sell like crazy. He was practically bouncing with excitement, while Luffy nodded and stepped closer. Alright, you can go now. Goodbye. Luffy didn't have Shanks' contact, so he planned to tell the entire world. Morgan suddenly felt a hard kick on his backside, sending him flying out as Luffy no longer needed him. Hope he doesn't bother me again today. Luffy shrugged, his gaze returning to the battles below. Now, let's go see how the training's going. Luffy said, moving closer as he heard explosions in the distance. Chapter 433, Fleet Status. After Luffy left Morgan's in the space above his territory, he returned to oversee the rest of his fleet's training. Battles continued with destruction all around that part of the island where they were, as the native animals and gorillas attacked their adversaries. Unlike a month ago, everyone kept fighting in an intense struggle. Thousands of people fought together, forming groups to try to halt the beasts' advance, which also numbered in the thousands, covering the entire area. The main battles involved hockey, with the fights primarily against the league captains. Tesoro, now clad in darkened golden armor layered with hockey, charged forward with a giant golden fist to strike at an elephant that was also using hockey on its trunk. Both launched their attacks simultaneously, but after a fierce struggle, Tesoro lost, flying backward like a rocket, digging into the ground before reappearing and returning to attack the animal. Soon, another explosion of hockey clashed between the two as Tesoro sought a rematch. Ideo was also fighting nearby, facing off against a giraffe. He used his legs to try to hit it, but the giraffe's tough skin reinforced with armament hockey made the fight extremely difficult. Even with his own hockey, the giraffe could predict his movements, showing it had observation hockey. The great leader of the Yonta Maria Grand Fleet, or Lumbus, was also in action, a bit further away in the middle of thousands of other soldiers fighting against the animals, using his fists against his opponent. He wasn't as powerful as the main crew, but he certainly possessed immense strength, standing above most others. Moria could launch objects from a distance at high speed. Focusing, he picked up a massive stone from the ground and hurled it at a lion that was charging to attack him. As the lion saw the huge stone hurtling towards it, it used its roar to emit a shock force due to the sound, causing the ground to explode with the impact and the stone to shatter before it even got close. Sai, along with his brother and grandfather, was also fighting against a group of giant beasts. "These monsters are strong," exclaimed Sai. He was already powerful but was struggling to face so many monsters at once. "Stop whining and fight," Chinjiao retorted, not wanting to see his grandson discouraged as he started facing more beasts than his grandsons could, showing the Chinjiao family had certainly grown stronger. Both brothers had learned to master a new level of hockey, but even so, the pressure was immense. Sai continued using his spear to defeat some of the monsters with firm blows. But Chinjiao stood out, growing even stronger than before, advancing against several beasts using his hockey-infused punches and even his head to defeat them. This only paused when a hippo appeared, and the two exchanged blows with headbutts. "This one's tough." "Very well. Let's see if you can keep it up," Chinjiao said in challenge after they both stepped back with no clear winner. After these words, he and the hippo charged at each other to fight once more. Cavendish, on the other hand, was also fighting. He defeated several smaller beasts in an instant, moving at high speed, with a twisted expression on his face. Luffy was interested to see if Cavendish would learn to control that second personality of his and had spent the last year pounding him whenever he transformed into that assassin to help him master the strength. The training worked, and now Cavendish could control his power better, stepping forward with a fierce face, facing many beasts that most people in front of Luffy struggled to handle. The members of Z, Carrot and Pedro, were also in the battle. They fought several beasts, transformed into their Sulong forms, but their opponents were even stronger, as they included the intelligent gorillas taken from Mihawk's lands. As they fought, these gorillas were developing their own techniques. All the members of Set already mastered the 6 styles and were learning to use Haki at a more advanced level than other animals, but the same could be said for the gorillas. Even in Sulong form, Koala and Pedro continued to learn to develop and control their abilities, fighting tirelessly. Other members, such as pirates that Luffy had hired and some he ended up accepting, were present, fighting this month. Luffy had placed his trust in them to carry his flag out to sea. These included prisoners from the Grand Tesoro whom Tesoro kept imprisoned due to debts, as well as those who had been transformed into toys by Sugar and even those who had made promises to Luffy or came seeking to serve under his flag. All of them were also growing stronger. Luffy set these members aside and looked at the new force that would take on the role of the Baroque orcs in the New World, while a separate group of people specialized in espionage had been selected to develop their own techniques and work as a team. Nearby were the giant pirates, who had come after Hadruden a few weeks prior. They joined Luffy's fleet after their captain decided it was so. The giants demanded to challenge those who would lead them as soon as they knew, resulting in knockouts with every punch Luffy landed on them, unable to do much as they became part of the fleet. Additionally, many groups of fishmen were there, organized by Jinbai at Luffy's request. He had asked for many inhabitants of Fishman Island to train, including one of Shirahoshi's brothers. Around 2,000 fishmen were training in the 6 styles and fighting against other animals, with some even developing Haki. They would be used not only to strengthen the Straw Hat territory under the sea, but some were also destined to become members of the Baroque orcs due to their infiltration capabilities in the sea and high-speed maneuvers in the waters of the New World. Others would serve as support in the fleet, filling up to 3 ships with captains. The fleet was growing significantly stronger, and even the other subordinates of the captains, like the main crew, were growing a lot. Luffy could see Bakura alongside the other main members of the Grand Tesoro fighting against a beast and defeating it, as well as the other crews. But these were just the recently added members of the fleet. There were also those who had been training for more than a year, stationed on the Dinosaur Island with a formation led by Page 1. Thinking of all the fleet captains made Luffy smile as he watched the battles taking place on the other island. It's not as large a number as Whitebeard's, who had 43. Luffy commented. But I've just arrived in the New World and already have 25 captains with naval forces, and this number could double soon. He said calmly. He knew that now, with the downfall of the 4 emperors from their posts, his fleet could grow exponentially as his name reached even the highest in the New World. Luffy sat down again, letting the more fruit model, amplify human devil fruit take effect over everyone there. As he observed the action, Luffy picked up a small fruit that had returned to its normal size. He found it hidden in his pocket. It was the Dorador fruit model, dimensional gate devil fruit. This fruit should be given to someone trustworthy. Luffy thought. It will be one of the most useful fruits for our missions from now on. He remarked, thinking that the fool Blue Uno might have left the world government, but he seemed more marked than Luffy could have imagined. Either way, it was over, and he had just hired the fugitive Cypher Pol 9 agent, thanks to this fruit. The battles continued for a while longer until Luffy decided to bring it to an end. Stop, that was great training for today. Luffy's voice, though spoken calmly, reached everyone on the island, even on the other dinosaur island. Sabo was leaving soon, so Luffy wanted to hold a feast for his brother. Everyone immediately stopped upon hearing his command, with the animals returning calmly to the forests, carrying the wounded to be treated. After all, that human had compelled them to fight, and they had no choice but to obey, for he was far too strong. After that, the fleet members also organized themselves to leave, some heading toward the area where Reiju was stationed for recovery, using her flames on the crowd to heal them quickly. Meanwhile, even on the other islands, they stopped fighting, beginning to regroup and make their way back to Dressrosa, setting up a grand feast with the presence of 20,000 fleet subordinates and 2 kings. Lucy learned that Sabo would be leaving soon. She spent some time with her brother, laughing and talking, as usual. This went on for a while as Luffy remained with his family, maintaining the usual style that included all his wives gathered around him, with his children and the main crew members nearby. Jinbai. Luffy called as he began to stand up. I'm going to sleep. Let all crew members know that tomorrow we'll have an official meeting, because we're going to start taking action in the next few days, and we need to decide a few things. He spoke as Jinbai nodded, indicating he would inform everyone else. Hey, Captain. You're leaving already? You, of all people, who used to stay the longest at the feasts. Zoro commented, trying to offer him some sake. Sorry, Zoro. I have a family now and a responsibility toward them. Luffy laughed, joking. Anyway, be there tomorrow, got it? He spoke as Zoro nodded. Luffy then returned to the castle, knowing he'd have to wake up early. In the morning, Luffy stood with Lucy in front of an unmarked ship at the port, while Sabo, Koala, and Hack were behind Sabo, along with other Revolutionary Army members, already boarding the ship. It seems we're saying goodbye, siblings. Sabo murmured, looking at them. That's right. Luffy said, breaking into a smile. But it won't be the last time we see each other. I'm sure that next time, we'll all be together again. Sabo nodded. Yes. Exclaimed Lucy beside him. Next time, Ace will be with us too, and we can finally toast with sake again. You don't even like sweet sake, Luffy said to his sister. But I can have a little, she replied, sticking her tongue out at him with a joyful smile. Well, anyway, I'm off. Until next time, Luffy and Lucy. Good luck. I hope to see you soon in the newspapers as the ones who took down Do and Big Mom. Sabo commented. Luffy nodded, as did his sister, watching their brother board the ship and sail away. Do you think it'll be long before we see him again, Luffy? Lucy asked. I don't think so, sister, but either way, we'll all be together soon. Now let's focus on what we need to do here. We're heading to Skypiea, where all the main crew members are gathering. It's time to put our plan into action, Luffy said with a serious look. The two siblings began jumping into the air, heading towards Skypiea to meet with all the main crew members. Chapter 434, World's Reaction to the Impending Wano War 01. Luffy was now with his entire crew, Yamato, Zoro, Kuina, Shirahoshi, Usopp, Chopper, Lamy, Reiju, Nami, Nojiko, Alvida, Vivi, Robin, Hucky, Baby 5, Chaochu, Vippo, Enel, Hugo, Jinbai, Lucy, Domino, Monet, Perona, Rebecca, Bonnie, Frankie, Brooke, and Yuta. Everyone gathered in front of the golden castle built by Skypiea as he announced their next steps and how they would handle Wano. The meeting lasted for an hour, during which he looked at each of his crew members individually. This was the official Black Pearl crew, 29 members, with more expected to join in the future after Wano. Luffy was confident in them. I understand, Captain. You want us to gain the country's support first? Vippo commented, showing admiration. Yes. I don't just want to take down Kaido. Wano needs to be freed differently. Wano needs to support us, too. I don't want to do everything for them, or they'll think they'll be treated the same way Kaido did once we take over. That's why I want the country's internal support. We need the samurai, Luffy said seriously. Luffy, I understand your reasoning. But how do you plan to do that? As soon as we're seen, we won't even reach Wano's lands without facing direct conflict. Kuina remarked. Because support from the lesser folk. They should worship and obey us after we defeat these guys. Enel sneered from the side. I think we should just defeat them and head to Egghead. We've wasted too much time here already. Bonnie said, eager to see Vegapunk as soon as possible. Luffy took a deep breath after each comment from his crew, though Kuina had a more logical approach. We have two ways to do this, addressing Kuina's point. Luffy began. Through the air. Kaido and Big Mom can't control the airspace, and when we move the fleet, they'll know we're drawing a lot of attention. So, we'll proceed with an aerial invasion. As for gathering support from the samurai, we'll do it in small numbers, just a team working under the shadows in various parts of Wano. It should be fairly simple, and from what the samurai we're in touch with has mentioned, Kaido is depriving the people of food. That must be causing major unrest in the country, especially with Big Mom there as well. Luffy explained with his arms crossed. I see. That sounds interesting. I'd like to take part. Zoro said with a smile. Great, then you all have 2 days to prepare. Meanwhile, we need to handle some things happening on this sea right now. That 7 warlords of the seas has still been contacting us constantly? Luffy asked Jinbai, who had taken on the role of a kind of foreign minister, organizing everything for them and their allies. Yes, he seems quite hurried now that the world government's meeting is being expedited. Jinbai replied. I figured. After all, at this meeting, some interesting things will be on the agenda. Firstly, the declaration of all the countries that won't attend, and clearly, they're turning their backs on the government. And believe me, there are many. Luffy said. Are you saying that? Vivi murmured, looking at Luffy with concern. Your father will be safer in Alabasta, trust me, Vivi. Anyway, it's the only country I'll remove from the first line of the Grand Line. I'll place it in Wano once we take the territory. Luffy said. He had asked Cobra not to attend the meeting, unlike other countries. The Goa Kingdom, with Queen Makino, the Syrup Kingdom with Queen Kaya, and the Kokoyasi Kingdom with the mayor as the acting king. These were the East Blue Kingdoms participating in the meeting due to the state of their nations and how they had developed. Syrup Kingdom had become a sort of Water 7 for shipbuilding in that blue, and Kokoyasi was known for its agriculture and powerful port, established long ago due to the clash of 2 econs. Luffy stopped pondering this and spoke again. Returning to the 7 warlords of the seas topic, he's desperate and will do anything to join our crew. After all, the program is about to end at this meeting, and he needs to infiltrate our crew. Luffy explained, knowing that there was one of the 7 warlords, with 3 still unknown, due to Doflamingo's death, the absence of Trafalgar Law, and Hancock's announcement as his wife to the world. They were still a mystery to Luffy. Although one of them wanted to join, it was obvious he was a government spy. Likely a holy knight placed by the government's force, and Luffy still didn't know how to handle him. He knew that even with everything set to go to Wano, things were far more complicated than they seemed. First, he had to deal with some people he hadn't faced since arriving in Dressrosa, allowing him to focus solely on building up his fleet. His crew absorbed his words about the 7 warlords of the seas being abolished at this moment, looking at him in surprise. "You're saying that?" Bonnie murmured. "Your father is still useful to the government, so everything will be fine until we reach Egghead." Luffy continued. "Don't ask me how I know this, I just do." Luffy shrugged. "So, what's the plan, Luffy?" Nami asked. "As I said, many things will happen at this meeting, but what matters to us is the war with Wano. We'll deal with the government later, though I'm expecting an attack from them both in Wano and Dressrosa." Luffy said. "They would attack here with an admiral already in custody?" Rebecca murmured. "I'm not sure, but let's assume they will and prepare. I'll leave a few captains here." Luffy replied. Everyone nodded, and then Lucy approached her brother. "You said we're going somewhere else. What would that be?" she asked curiously. "There's someone with a very dangerous plan to destroy the New World, so we're going to stop him. I want you to do this on your own because he is Zephyr," Luffy said. "Trainer Zephyr?" Lucy exclaimed in surprise. "Yes. Be ready tomorrow, we'll leave at dawn," Luffy said as Lucy nodded. "Luffy, did you see today's newspaper? It just arrived." Usopp approached Luffy as Lucy left. "No, but I can imagine what it might be," Luffy commented, glancing at the newspaper Usopp handed him. Since he'd spoken with Morgans yesterday, while the journalist was trying to infiltrate to gather information about them, Luffy had confronted him and decided to share a few important things. After all, it would be good for the world to know these things. In the newspaper, unsurprisingly, was Luffy's declaration that he was preparing his crew to head to Wano. The paper detailed the movements and steps of the Straw Hat crew, declaring to the world that, finally, a large-scale war was about to happen in Wano. Meanwhile, Dressrosa appeared to be in full preparation for battle. He couldn't help but wonder how the world would react to this, with 2 major events happening simultaneously. People were eagerly waiting for the outcome of the meeting at Mary Joy's among all the kingdoms affiliated with the world government, as many things were happening globally, and the government needed to make a decision. Others speculated on what would happen in the New World in the 4 Emperors conflict and how the government would respond to the end of this war. Although Luffy had earned a great deal of prestige by now, he would still be up against 2 4 Emperors simultaneously, with 2 entire fleets. It was clear that Kaido and Big Mom had far more people than he did, exceeding 100,000 soldiers, while he was advancing with a force of around 20 to 30,000. A much smaller number. Even so, the Straw Hats stood firm. Luffy turned the newspaper, putting the subject aside, as he couldn't see the public's reaction immediately, though he was curious to know how people would respond. On another page, the newspaper mentioned the 6th child of a certain couple, which made Luffy think of Shanks and how he would react to this news of him and Ute having a child. Luffy then set the newspaper aside. "Anyway, thanks, Usopp. I'm going to organize a few things now," he said, leaving his companions for a moment. Everyone nodded as Luffy walked off alone, moving forward to prepare the details of his plans, even without revealing everything to the crew. He knew he always needed a strategy to handle this kind of situation, avoiding any disadvantage and even planning the next steps all the way to the final island. After all, he was the leader responsible not only for his companions and friends but also for his family and children, whom he had to protect. Meanwhile, in Dressrosa, the city woke up bustling with activity. A man was walking through the streets with a cane, his hands gripping a sea-stone chain firmly. This had become a daily routine for him, as ever since Luffy declared that he liked him, he hadn't kept him in a cell and had even given him a house on the condition that he wouldn't harm the country or attempt to escape. Fujitora walked calmly, but soon his ears picked up on the conversations of the townspeople that morning. "So it's starting. They'll be leaving soon. Will Dressrosa be alright without them? After all, we're enemies of the government now, aren't we? Who needs the government or the Marines? But yes. They might attack us. Still, I believe the Straw Hat must have some plan in mind." Someone else commented. "Yes, they're heading to Wano to defeat those evil guys. They say Wano is like our kingdom was under Doflamingo, enslaved in silence. No, it's even worse. I heard that over there, they're starving while the Shogun and Kaido treat their people like real slaves. That's terrible. I hope the Straw Hat and his crew free the country like they did with Dressrosa. Let's wait and see what happens. I'm sure they'll succeed and soon be back here, protecting Dressrosa again. The conversations continued, all focused on the great war that was about to happen. Since the Battle of the Best at Manaford over a year ago, the world once again found itself on the brink of a new war, now among pirates, which would decide the future of the new world. Fujitora said nothing as he walked. He knew this would happen, but hearing people speak this way made him feel strange. After all, everyone saw the pirate as a hero, not as someone the Marine should be fighting. In a way, Fujitora thought this perspective made sense, considering the Marines hadn't done anything to change Dressrosa. It took a pirate to transform this kingdom into what it is today, and now Wano would likely go through the same. I hope he succeeds. These people seem quite happy with the way things are. Fujitora murmured to himself as he entered a betting establishment he frequented daily. He could go there as long as he earned his own money, something he managed by doing various jobs. He was quite kind to the locals, who found it curious how an admiral behaved and didn't complain. You came? A voice sounded from the corner as Fujitora approached. Yes, I'm here, and this time, I'll beat you. He replied. Good, that's great. More money for me and a way to ease my boredom. The mysterious man responded, while Fujitora nodded in silence. This man was extremely powerful, as his haki sensed. Perhaps as strong as he was, or maybe even stronger, even without using his devil fruit. This mysterious opponent he had met while betting had been in Dressrosa for a long time, saying he was there for Monkey D. Luffy. He had even managed to enter the country, but Luffy always said he would talk to him later. And so, the man had spent a month in Dressrosa, gambling and enjoying what the kingdom had to offer, as if on vacation, waiting for the day he could fight Luffy, as the young pirate had proposed since they met in Impel Down. Chapter 435, World's Reaction to the Impending Wano War 2. Once again, the world learned about the Straw Hat through the news publications. After a month of silence, with no updates from the outside, the world's eyes were on them. They had isolated themselves within their territory following a bomb incident, which led to a negotiation between the crew, the Navy, and the government. Beyond the government's public statement about a non-aggression pact, it was revealed that the four emperors' lineage lived on through 5 children, a fact that somewhat shocked the world. These children might possess as much potential as their father and even their mothers, casting a veil of uncertainty over the world for those who deeply feared Luffy's power. This morning, the news the world had been waiting for finally broke. The war in the New World was underway, and speculations were arising from every corner, reaching even the Blues. In a kingdom in the East Blue, newspapers were in the hands of the citizens of Goa, each reading with their own thoughts. There were those who supported Luffy and those who didn't. To some, he was seen as a tyrannical pirate who entered their kingdom and killed the former king, without them fully understanding what had actually happened. However, they were a minority in the kingdom. Nevertheless, they did not despise the queen, who was managing the kingdom exceptionally well with the help of her ministers. Despite their misgivings, they couldn't deny that Monkey D. Luffy was one of the world's most powerful pirates, now returning from an entirely different kind of battle. Thankfully, he hadn't just killed a king in cold blood. Throughout the kingdom, debates filled the morning air, both in the capital and beyond. In Goa's palace, the queen sat on her throne, reading the newspaper. Luffy, I hope you're safe. Makino smiled softly as she read the article. It had been nearly 2 years since she last saw Luffy, from the time he left the kingdom of Goa, embarking on his adventure to Logtown and beyond. He had since ventured across the Grand Line. Every time he appeared in the newspaper, she and others eagerly absorbed every detail about his journey at sea. And now, after a year of absence from the headlines, he was back, dominating the New World, recruiting kingdoms, and even establishing a headquarters with all those islands floating in the Dressrosa region. She read about it in the papers, marveling and wondering how Luffy and Lucy were doing. Luffy, if you don't beat those guys in the New World, I'll have to kick your butt myself. Didin declared, smoking a cigarette and wearing a uniform of the kingdom. Tears were in her eyes as she read the news, an obvious sign of concern for Luffy facing off against 2 major New World pirates, with photos of Kaido and Big Mom splashed across the same page. She had become quite capable over the past year. With Luffy's absence at sea, some pirates believed the kingdom of Goa harbored treasure from his crew and tried their luck invading. But Didin, possessing the chain fruit, defeated them with ease. Even the queen, wielding the sound fruit, a gift she had received from Luffy, had grown incredibly strong. She was no longer the harmless bar girl anyone could easily intimidate while she just smiled. Now, after Makino wished to become strong enough to face the challenges Luffy encountered at Manaford, she trained tirelessly. The other ministers present weren't as strong as the queen herself and Didin, who was training an entire royal guard from her bandits. Didin had turned her life around, from isolated mountain living to a more luxurious life within the palace, while ensuring the kingdom's safety. The kingdom was thriving, with Luffy supporting their growth economically through alliances with other kingdoms. Free trade among them with minimal taxes boosted the economy and attracted many people who opened businesses there. Of course, Luffy still maintained control over all major decisions, and one of his direct orders was to clean up the dump along the walls of Goa's capital within a year. He knew well the suffering people endured there, and the result was that now, not only was the area cleared of trash, but a small town was beginning to rise there. This expansion of the kingdom offered substantial tax breaks and incentives from the court for anyone willing to invest. Now, those same people who once had to scavenge for their food in the dump could have a chance to build a life and sustain themselves. Back at the palace, as the court gathered with the tropic being Monkey D. Luffy, one of the ministers stepped forward, concerned about the time. "My queen, we can't afford to delay any longer. We have until noon to start leaving the kingdom. We must reach Mary Joey's before the world government meeting begins." The minister spoke in a more urgent tone. "All right. Luffy will be fine in the new world. I'm sure he's going to have a great time." She smiled. "My queen, I don't think a fight between 4 emperors will be fun. It will be a bloodbath, perhaps worse than what we saw at Maniford," one of the ministers said, attempting to correct her. "But Luffy always has fun. I'm sure he'll do just that, now that he's with Lucy too," she replied, still smiling innocently, while the ministers simply sighed, knowing they couldn't change their queen's mindset. In the end, they began preparing as Makino was seen packing her bags with the help of the castle servants. Despite their protests about the queen doing such things herself, Makino never minded and quickly packed her bags. Only as she was leaving did a minister rush up to her with an urgent tone. "My queen. The ship is ready, but there's a marine ship approaching on the sea," he exclaimed, as Makino raised an eyebrow and ascended the stairs with the minister, arriving in the throne room with a balcony outside, where the kingdom's high-ranking officials were gathered. In the port, they could see their ship waiting for them, richly adorned with Goa's emblem, a gift from the Syrup Kingdom by Queen Kaya herself. But at that moment, the ship wasn't what caught everyone's attention, it was the marine ship cutting through the sea toward them. "That flag," Makino murmured, surprised, as were the others, for the flag was quite famous. "That's GGG Garp," Didon stammered repeatedly, and just as she managed to speak, someone landed right behind her, towering over her with crossed arms. "I see you still remember me, Didon," Garp said, grinning as his imposing shadow loomed behind Goa's protector, his red eyes glowing behind her as a threat that made Didon fear for her life as soon as she turned. Didon slowly turned her head, showing a pale and desperate face, thinking that Garp would try to hit her and arrest her this time. "Don't look at me like that. As far as I know, you haven't committed any crimes. Besides, you're protecting your kingdom. I always had faith in you, Didon. Congratulations on choosing the right path in your life." "Boo-ah-ha-ha-ha-ha-ha." Garp laughed, leaving Didon stunned. "Hello, Garp. Welcome to Goa." Makino approached with a smile. "It's always good to be home, Makino. How have you been?" Garp replied, returning the smile as the queen nodded, indicating she was well. "Garp, is that you?" The former mayor of Fuusha village approached, wearing his typical minister's suit. "I'm here to escort Makino safely to Mary Joey's," he replied. After all, the entire navy had dispatched guards to accompany the kings, as they indirectly funded the navy through the tributes handed over to the Tenri Obito. "That's great. Have you heard anything about Luffy?" Makino said, her smile growing wider than ever before. "That damned brat is launching a new war against those two," Garp muttered, well aware of the statements in the newspapers. "Are they dangerous?" Makino asked cautiously. "They used to work together in the past, on the same crew," Garp murmured. Just thinking about that group and the chaos they caused made Garp uneasy. Not that Luffy reminded him much of them, but as his grandfather, Garp knew Luffy did what he thought was right and didn't spread unnecessary terror across the seas. It might be hypocritical of him, but Luffy was his grandson, above all else. While everyone around him looked worried at Garp's words, he suddenly smiled. "But don't worry. Luffy knows what he's doing. I hope to teach him a lesson myself once this whole war and the world government meeting are over," he muttered, and everyone felt more at ease seeing Garp's confidence in Luffy. "Anyway, that brat. He's given me another grandchild," he said with a proud tone as he looked at a picture of Luffy with Ute and his son. "I should recruit him into the navy before he becomes a pirate like his father," he said with determination. "Isn't he just a newborn baby?" Didon exclaimed, unable to believe Garp could be so shameless. "This is Shanks's child. Does this make our queen a grandmother?" a minister asked, still firmly believing that ever since Luffy had announced Makino as the wife of Shanks, the red-haired pirate. "That rascal. He's involved with 2 4 emperor's daughters and got both of them pregnant. I wouldn't be surprised if one day he shows up with a daughter of Big Mom. The mayor murmured, though his expression showed a certain joy. But I'm glad that Luffy and the girl got along. I still remember them in Fuushof village, running around while the pirates were drinking in Makino's bar. He said, reminiscing. They were so adorable. And in the end, they ended up together. So sweet, and their son looks just like Luffy. Makino gave a small laugh as she looked at the photo as well. I swear, I'll find that Shanks and make sure he doesn't corrupt my grandson the way he did Luffy. My next goal is to capture him before he can reach my lovely grandchild. Garp said with determination. The conversation soon wound down as everything settled between them. They made their way to the ship, while Vice Admiral Garp's ship was already alongside, waiting. Kobe wasn't on board, as he had gone elsewhere to escort another king. So, Makino set sail under Garp's escort, heading directly southeast, planning to cross the Calm Belt. Garp's ship had the necessary technology to avoid issues with Sea Kings. Chapter 436, World's Reaction to the Impending Wano War 03. In other parts of the East Blue, news about the Straw Hats was spreading while more and more Navy ships headed toward the kingdoms that had been established over the last 2 years and had now classified themselves as part of the world government. While everyone had their own comments, in Syrup, Queen Kaya carefully read the headlines in the newspaper. I hope you're okay. Usopp. She murmured, seeing the photo of her husband among Luffy's crew. In Kokoyasi, the minister was also preparing to head to Marijoi's to represent the country on behalf of Nami and Nojiko. He glanced at the newspaper with concern, silently vowing to kill Luffy if anything happened to the 2 sisters. In Shimatsuki village, Kuina's father was reading the newspaper alongside his students, who were crowded around him with a copy of the paper. Master. How will Zoro and Kuina face another war? This seems incredible. How strong are they now, I wonder? While the students chatted about the news, Kaoshiru, the master and Kuina's father, kept a serene expression, contemplating how they would overcome the next challenge, which could be even worse than Manafort. After all, he didn't need to worry too much. It had been over a year and 3 months since the War of the Best took place. If Kuina had improved so much by Manafort after just 6 months sailing with her crew before that war, how could he even imagine what she had become now? In Logtown, the new mayor also anticipated seeing great achievements from Monkey D. Luffy, while making comments that only he fully understood. In a year, Logtown had become a maritime power. Despite the rise of other kingdoms like Syrup and Kokoyasi, trade continued to thrive. As the closest island to Reverse Mountain, it attracted people from all the blues. Moreover, Luffy's old friend had greatly improved the city's infrastructure, even creating a parallel army to the Navy. Since the Navy couldn't be removed from Logtown entirely, this new force was established to serve the city's interests rather than blindly following the world government's orders. As East Blue's inhabitants discussed the upcoming war, some people in Paradise were also carefully watching the news, including, without a doubt, King Cobra. I want to see my grandson. He exclaimed in the middle of the throne room, while everyone tried to calm him down. My king. We cannot leave the country. We're already skipping the World Summit. Lord Luffy requested that we stay in the kingdom. Pell, his chief guard, tried to reason with him. But I must go to the New World. Don't you understand? He's the future king of Alabasta. King Sinbad. He sounds incredible. Cobra began speaking with the pride and joy of knowing his lineage would continue, and that the throne would one day pass to his grandson. At least, he hoped so. He hadn't seen any pictures of him this year, despite asking Vivi repeatedly. Due to a lack of communication, only Pell could describe the boy to the king after returning from training with Luffy in Skypiea, alongside Baroque orcs and members of various other kingdoms. This was the first time Cobra saw his grandson in the newspaper, among an article describing all of Luffy's children. He desperately wanted to see his grandson as soon as possible but understood he would have to wait until, as Luffy said, a base was established in the New World. People in Paradise were also discussing the war. While Luffy's territories cheered for him, other islands feared how the conflict might affect them. Kings from all blues continued departing their kingdoms and being escorted to Marijoi's. The New World wasn't much different. Like Alabasta, Dressrosa and Prudence also refused the world government's summons and had ceased communication, even as the government and navy attempted to reach them. Meanwhile, Blackbeard was reading the newspaper, a sinister grin forming on his face on his island. He began summoning his entire crew and contacting those battling the remnants of the Whitebeard pirates. Meanwhile, Ace received a call from Sabo that same day, saying he was leaving Dressrosa and sharing how his meeting with Luffy and Lucy had gone over the past month. You received a fruit from him, that's certainly good. Ace was happy that Sabo had also gained a mythical beast. Yes. Now I'm heading somewhere else while they've set off for the war. Sabo commented. Yes. I wish I could be with them, after all, I have some acquaintances in Wano. Ace murmured, but he couldn't abandon his responsibilities here, being attacked by the Blackbeard pirates all the time. I understand that you can't abandon this territory, and Luffy knows that too. Don't worry, Luffy will appear in the newspaper as someone victorious. Sabo said confidently. I think you're right. Ace said finally as they continued talking about other things. Meanwhile, in Wano, the newspaper had finally arrived in Onigashima. Kaido's men quickly approached, entering the main hall that morning, bringing the newspaper in their hands as they showed it to their leader, who was drinking beside Big Mom. She, in turn, was eating sweets, constantly served by her toy soldiers. Lord Kaido. They announced their presence with an urgent tone. What is it? Kaido asked grumpily, having just woken up and being interrupted as he tried to cure his hangover by drinking more. Meanwhile, his crew was by his side, watching calmly. Big Mom's crew was on the other side, equally attentive. The Straw Hats. They're going to attack us soon. They announced it in the newspaper, said the man from the Beast Pirates, handing over the newspaper. Kaido stopped drinking immediately, and even Big Mom halted her meal, surprised. Let me see that. Kaido ordered quickly. The man placed the newspaper in front of him and ran off, unable to withstand the oppressive atmosphere with 4 emperors. So the brat is finally coming? I thought he wouldn't come anymore. I'll capture Yamato and his granddaughter as soon as he shows up. Kaido declared, laughing with a mix of fury and satisfaction. Mama. Your soul will be mine. Big Mom stated with a sinister tone, while everyone around seemed confident now, with the 4 emperors united against the crew. King, Jack, and Queen stood motionless beside Kaido, analyzing the situation. It was then that Ulti, near anger, commented. I hope Page 1 is still alive. Otherwise, I'll blow the head off that raptor brother. She exclaimed with hatred. Ulti was clearly worried about her brother, who had been in the hands of enemy pirates for over a year, wondering how much he had been tortured, not imagining that now, Page 1 worked for Luffy as a dinosaur captain. Finally, we're going to fight. I was getting bored, said Smoothie, looking at Kitakuri. Yes, the time has come. We'll finally get our revenge, right, Cracker? Kitakuri commented. Cracker nodded slightly. He seemed nervous. He knew well the capabilities of that crew and knew more than his siblings what the Straw Hats could do. Despite having so many powerful people in that room, he still had doubts. After so much time, things might have become much more difficult to handle. While everyone looked at the newspaper, Kaido gave his orders to some men. Very well. Let's prepare Wano for war. I want all ships stationed at every edge of the country to intercept the Straw Hats. I also want the productivity of all factories increased in the coming weeks. I don't care how many die in the process. And summon Orochi to come here, it's time to deal with him. His men moved quickly to carry out the orders. Beside Kaido, in addition to the 3 disasters and the Tobirapo, thousands of beast pirates soldiers were already prepared. A number of them were Smile users, further increasing the army's strength, having the most powerful army among the 4 emperors. From the worst generation, there were X-Drake, Scratchman Apu, and Basil Hawkins, who had ended up joining in the past year since they entered the New World. On Big Mom's side stood the Charlotte family, Homies, and all her captains, many of whom were renowned names from the New World. Among them were Sanji and his family, Germa 66, who had settled in her territory after being defeated by the Straw Hats and escaping with Cracker. From the worst generation, she only had Kaponbaj, married to Lola's sister. Her supporting force was significantly inferior to Kaido's. Even her strongest, Kitakuri, could only be compared to Jack the Drought among Kaido's disasters. Nevertheless, Big Mom was someone not to be underestimated, as her strength was only slightly below Kaido's. Thus, a large-scale operation began in Wano, affecting not just the local sea but also the entire country. The pressure on its people and inhabitants increased more than ever. Out at sea, Kid was sailing on his ship, glaring at the newspaper with rage. His face, full of scars, and his missing arm bore the marks of the battles he had fought over the past year. He was frustrated. Despite having achieved a bounty of over 1 million Baileys, everything he did to match the Straw Hats still seemed insufficient. Looking at the newspaper only fueled his frustration further. What are we going to do, Captain? Killer asked, his expression serious. We're going to Wano. Kid replied, determined to prove his position in the New World. Elsewhere, another towering man was also staring at the newspaper, crushing it in anger. He doesn't come looking for me. And now he's going to fight Kaido? So be it. I'll find him there too. He declared firmly, pushing his small ship toward Wano. Even if he had to fight Kaido and Monkey D. Luffy himself. Near Boff, Shanks was stationed on an island after a banquet, reading the news with a cautious look. So, this war is finally going to start. Look, Captain. Luffy has 13 giants under his command. One of his crewmates exclaimed, surprised. I knew he had 2, after securing them for his Paradise campaign. But it seems he's gathered 11 more giants. That's truly impressive. Shanks gave a faint smile. I wonder what will happen from now on. Lucky Roo, one of his crewmates, grabbed the newspaper while munching on some meat. He flipped through it calmly, scanning for more news until he suddenly froze. Something wrong, Roo? Ben Beckman asked, noticing his unusual behavior. Shanks. Uta's in the newspaper. Roo said hesitantly. What? Shanks' tone changed instantly. What's in the newspaper? Yuta. She's in the newspaper. Roo repeated. The crew fell silent. Yuta had never been part of the Straw Hat crew, so Shanks was unaware that she had left the island of music. He had not been in contact with the man who frequently asked about her over the past few years. She hadn't participated in the War of Manafort, and her pregnancy had kept her out of the headlines. However, now, with her child, something new had made the front pages thanks to Luffy's exposure. Shanks snatched the newspaper from Roo like lightning, reading it rapidly. What is this? She had a child with Luffy. And he's already born. Roo replied amid the silence. The initial quiet turned into collective shock. Shanks stood frozen for a moment, utterly stunned, before his eyes widened. What? He immediately pulled the newspaper closer, scanning it frantically to see if there had been a mistake. The entire crew gathered around him, watching what he was analyzing. In the newspaper, there was a photo of Ute holding a baby beside Luffy. No one knew she had been with Luffy, let alone that she was pregnant with his child. How did this happen? How could he do this? That bastard touched my daughter. Shanks roared, his face contorted with fury as red hockey began emanating from his body. He glanced at the newspaper once again, a third time. The entire crew remained silent until, in the distance, a furious scream echoed from the island they were on. Red lightning shot into the sky, turning it dark, reflecting Shanks' overwhelming rage and shock. Chapter 437, Protection of Dressrosa. While the world continued reacting to the war between 4 emperors, in Dressrosa, not even an hour had passed since the 2 old men had met at the betting house. As they played calmly, someone entered the establishment. At that moment, the betting house manager looked surprised at the new visitor and quickly approached the newcomer. Lord Luffy, it is an honor to have you here. If I had known of your presence, we would have organized a reception worthy of you. He seemed eager as Luffy entered, but the latter merely shrugged it off. Many people treated him this way now, and it was often irritating. You don't need to be so formal. I'm just passing through. I want to talk to one of my guests. Luffy said calmly as he walked forward, stopping in front of the 2 men betting, who seemed deeply focused on the game. Mr. Luffy, it's good to see you here. I hope you bring me some luck. Fujitora murmured with a smile, not even glancing at Luffy, who kept his attention on the game. However, beside him, his opponent threw an unsatisfied look at Luffy, seeming to think he might use Conqueror's Haki to intimidate him. Luffy merely smiled at this, unconcerned that before him sat a monster, even greater than Fujitora. The man observed Luffy's silence and said nothing as well, returning to the game while it continued. It was a card game. Poker. Chips clattered onto the table continuously as they played on. Both eventually laid down their cards after trying to bluff each other in a particularly tense round. They each aimed to outwit the other until, in the end, Fujitora lost after revealing his hand. Tell me, Mr. Luffy, did I lose? Fujitora asked, a glimmer of hope in his tone. You could have spoken directly to me, Fujitora. I don't think I'm petty enough to cheat a blind old man out of some gold. The man in front of Fujitora spoke in a stern tone, also casting a displeased look, seeming offended at the insinuation of dishonesty in gambling. Our guest is right, Fujitora. You lost. Luffy said, as the result was clear. That's unfortunate. It seems I'll have to work for the rest of the day to earn some money and play again tomorrow. Fujitora remarked in conclusion. Luffy raised an eyebrow. That man simply worked to rebuild Dressrosa, helping the other citizens, earning money just to gamble against that opponent and, invariably, lose. Although he sometimes won, the truth was that Fujitora always ended up at a loss, playing until he had nothing left. This guy. How can he be a marine admiral like this? Luffy couldn't help but think as he watched Fujitora begin to stand and leave his chips behind with a sorrowful expression. Luffy merely sighed as Fujitora departed and turned back to the man still seated, now gazing at him. Is it alright if I play with you? Luffy asked, ignoring Fujitora, while the other man narrowed his eyes at him. Fine. It'll just be more money for me, considering you've been ignoring me for a month. The man said with some irritation. Don't take it the wrong way. I told you, I've been training my crew. And I'm a new father. I had to give some attention to my family and relax a bit. I need a vacation too, don't you think? After all, you've lived a long life. We young folks need to enjoy ours as well. Luffy said calmly, while the man stared at him with emotionless eyes for a moment. May I sit? Luffy spoke again after the silence, taking the seat Fujitora had vacated and facing his new opponent. Meanwhile, he addressed the manager standing nearby, beginning to pull several sacks of gold from his pocket. Take this and exchange it all for chips, he said, as the man widened his eyes and scrambled to catch the sacks tumbling onto him, falling flat to the floor under their weight. Lord Luffy. I don't think we can accept this from you. The manager murmured hesitantly. After all, Luffy stood above King Riku and was the hero of this country. Luffy shook his head. Don't give me the talk. I might be a pirate, but I'm not a thief who steals from my own people in my territory. Take this and get me chips. No complaints, Luffy said in a serious tone. The manager quickly nodded, standing up even more flustered, and rushed off with all the gold to exchange it for a sack full of chips. You actually know how to be fair. The man in front of Luffy commented with a wry smile. I do. I'm not a thief either. Not the kind of four emperors who enslaves and robs. Luffy shrugged. No wonder Fujitora said what he saw in you was different. The man replied. Anyway, enough talk. Let's play, Luffy said as the manager returned at that moment with the sack full of chips, beginning to place them on the table. His opponent took the initiative, picking up the cards and starting to shuffle them before dealing them to himself and Luffy. The game quickly began. Both players analyzed their cards in silence. The nervous manager watched from behind. He didn't recognize who this other man was but was worried about Luffy. He had never seen him here before, and now Luffy was playing against a customer who always seemed to win frequently. What the manager didn't know was the kind of battle taking place at that moment as the two men stared at their cards. Despite appearing to be just a card game, it was a duel of observation hockey. Both were using their abilities to predict each other's future moves, making the game extremely complex. Each thought generated a whirlwind of possibilities and consequences, causing hesitation before every play. Damn, this is so difficult. You're worse than Fujitora, the man muttered with a frustrated tone. I've never played against someone this fast with observation hockey. It's certainly irritating, Luffy admitted as every move he considered seemed to open up new sequences of complex futures. They continued the game, always looking for the least harmful way to advance, until the man decided to break the silence with a new topic. Tell me, why have you been stalling me for a month? I thought that when you came to challenge me in Impel Down after helping to free me, we'd fight as soon as you saw me. Instead, you've been dragging this out. Were you serious back then? The man asked, laying his cards on the table while Luffy analyzed, thought again, and saw multiple futures before making his move and drawing new cards from the deck. You're right. I still want to fight you, but things are a bit complicated. As much as I want to face a legendary pirate like you, I'd like to ask for more time, Luffy said calmly, preparing another move and placing his cards on the table. And you want to leave me here, waiting? The man asked simply, his tone serious. Luffy had to flash a more apologetic smile this time. Sorry about that. But I'd appreciate it. After all, the government will attack us as soon as we start the war. But I need someone strong enough to hold the line here, Luffy said calmly. The man didn't respond, continuing to make his moves. I bet my chips, Luffy said, beginning to place chips on the table. The man did the same, matching the amount and then adding more. I'll double it, he said before returning to their previous conversation. Why do you need my help? I thought you could protect your territory, the man asked again. I have children. I have 6 kids in this place. I can't leave them without protection. I need to make sure they're safe while their father faces a new challenge at sea. Their mothers will be with me, and I need all the strength I can gather to face 2 four emperors at once, Luffy explained. He had a protection plan, but with his guest's help, he'd be even more certain of his family's safety. You're asking a lot of me. You know that, don't you? The man raised an eyebrow before returning his focus to the game. I know that very well. And I even apologize for asking something so inconvenient. But I promise, we'll fight as soon as things are resolved, Luffy said as the man seemed lost in thought. He pushed more chips onto the table, raising his bet, and Luffy matched it. This continued for a while until the table was overflowing with chips, both on and around it. All of their chips were now in play, turning it into an all-or-nothing round. Despite Luffy having a lot of money, the man managed to match all of Luffy's chips, accumulated from his victories against Fujitora. Alright, I'll do it, the man finally said, though his voice carried a tone of dissatisfaction. Luffy's grin widened more than ever as he watched the man lay all his cards on the table. "Looks like I lost," the man murmured at last. As predicted, Luffy advanced his cards, revealing a better hand than his opponent. With that, all the chips now belonged to Luffy. "This must be worth around 500 million. Luffy commented calmly before standing and looking at the seated man. "Thank you. Don't worry, keep all this money. After all, I don't want you to go unrewarded for the service you'll do for me. Although it's not much, I'll reward you more next time we meet, Patrick Redfield," Luffy said, walking out, leaving the man deep in thought as he watched the Straw Hat's back disappear into the streets of Dressrosa. "Well, looks like I don't have a choice," the man murmured, letting a smile escape his lips. Luffy was satisfied he had managed to convince him. He had arrived over a month ago, and Luffy hadn't wanted to face him then. The idea of using him for protection had come just a few days ago. In Dressrosa, Luffy had already ensured protection against any government attack, but having Patrick Redfield would make things even better. He didn't know exactly what the government would do, but he knew they wouldn't use Uranus to destroy his kingdom. After all, Dressrosa and the other allied kingdoms were under the world's watchful eye at the moment. An attack of that scale would damage the world government's reputation. It's still morning. "Now, let's see how the others are organizing for tomorrow's departure," Luffy said at last before disappearing into the skies over Dressrosa. Meanwhile, his crew and fleet were scattered across various islands and kingdoms, preparing themselves to finally march to war. Chapter 438, Departing for War 01. The next day, Dressrosa was more bustling than at any other time since the fall of the Don Quixote family, as the people of Dressrosa kept a close watch on the harbor. A major movement was not limited to Dressrosa's port. Islands like Prudence and others across the territory were also alive with activity. The ports were filled with ships as the entire fleet organized for war, with all kinds of Jolly Rogers fluttering on the ship's sails. Massive vessels like the Gran Tesoro, capable of transporting a large portion of the fleet's army, were being loaded. As more and more men boarded, not only were people embarking, but weapons of all kinds, crafted with Luffy's special material, were being stored in preparation for battle. Lola had been producing more and more alcohol metal for the entire fleet over the past month, while the factory in Skypiea operated at full capacity with Shiki's former crew working tirelessly. Not only that, but Luffy had also taken over the Don Quixote family's factory and repurposed it, further increasing production. Meanwhile, Lola kept working non-stop, saying she'd do anything for her husband, while he had to play his part nearly every day. In addition to the ships used by all the captains, the animals also had their own ship prepared. Giran, Luffy's shoulder monkey, served as captain of the common animals. They had a ship island custom-built for navigation with the help of Frankie and Shiki's scientist. Page 1, on the other hand, was the captain of the dinosaurs. Originally from Little Garden, these dinosaurs had evolved enough to use Haki, becoming a force that would surely shock Kaido. They too had their own ship island. Luffy could barely imagine Kaido's face when he saw his former subordinates now working for Luffy, with an army of Haki-wielding dinosaurs. A true beast crew made of dinosaurs and animals, without the need for smile fruits to create them. This activity continued for hours as the ships prepared, outfitting themselves with pirate crews and weaponry. Luffy was overseeing everything from the Black Pearl in Dressrosa, with several members of his crew and fleet aboard the ship, though not all of them. It was at that moment that lightning struck from the sky in their direction, as Enel descended toward the ship. Luffy, who had been reviewing reports, set them aside to look at Enel appearing before him. "It's done, demon. All communications and Dendenmushi in the region have been blocked," Enel reported, fulfilling Luffy's request to prevent any communication that could report his fleet's movements to the world government. "All right, just prepare to depart soon," Luffy responded in a neutral tone. "Can't I come with you, Luffy?" Viola approached, leaving her niece behind as she stood by Luffy's side. "You've certainly grown much stronger over the past year, but it's still not enough for this fight," Luffy stated calmly, being honest with her. "But..." She hesitated, reluctant to miss the chance to fight alongside Luffy. "You're more important here. You know that. I need you to monitor everything. On the sea, below it, and in the sky. We can't afford to be caught off guard if the government launches an attack. Understand?" Luffy spoke seriously. After a moment of silence, Viola nodded, understanding what Luffy meant. "Luffy, everything is ready. Jinbai, Usopp, and Frankie have prepared the ship for departure," Nami said as she approached, holding a map of the New World, trying to plot a trouble-free course to Wano or at least part away through the sea. "That's good. But we still need to wait for the others," Luffy replied as Nico Robin and Nojiko passed by his side. "Captain. So I'll be staying with you?" Sai asked, approaching Luffy. "Yes. I need you to use your new devil fruit in Wano. When we arrive, I'll give you instructions," Luffy said. He left Sai behind and looked toward a corner of the ship, spotting Usopp, Chopper, and Bippo together, talking and watching the harbor activity as the other ships made their preparations. "Usopp, I want you to prepare the wig." "Understood?" Luffy said as Usopp looked at him and grinned. "Of course, Captain. Bippo will be ready when the time comes," he replied, while Luffy nodded. Bippo, however, looked confused, as he would soon be wearing the wig for an important mission involving the entire fleet. "Finally, I'm excited to set foot in Wano again," Yamato remarked as she boarded the ship alongside Vivi, Rachel, and Lamy. "Master, I brought some things to help you organize the fleet. They boost concentration," Baby 5 said, approaching with a tray of cookies. Luffy unconsciously picked one up and ate it, only for it to explode in his mouth. He remained unfazed, continuing to focus on the map. "Captain!" Brook exclaimed, looking at Luffy with fear, while Luffy appeared completely unbothered. "I wouldn't eat that even if I had a mouth." "Yo-oh-oh." Brook chuckled at his own joke. At that moment, Zoro, Hugo, Alvida, and Kuina climbed the gangplank and boarded the ship. Luffy picked up a Den Mushi and began talking to members aboard other fleet ships. "You seem a bit anxious," Shirahoshi observed, addressing one of the pink-haired girls. "I'm a little nervous. I want to get to Egghead as soon as possible," Bonnie said, crossing her arms beside Shirahoshi and Rebecca, as Violet returned to speak with her niece. "Luffy, we've organized all the paperwork in your cabin," Monet said as she approached with Domino by her side. "Great. You can settle in on the ship," Luffy replied after hanging up the Den Mushi. Once they left, his gaze shifted to a woman carrying a baby toward him. "I want you to speak to our son one last time," Yuta said as she approached the father of her child. "Of course," Luffy said, taking the baby, who would remain in Dressrosa. "Captain. Everything is ready," Jinbei said, approaching with Hooky and Frankie after they inspected the ship's interior to ensure it was ready to set sail. "Great. Take your positions," Luffy instructed. "Sir Luffy." Still holding his son beside the boy's mother, Luffy turned to look at the mink rabbit standing with Pedro. "Carrot, Pedro, you'll both be on this ship," Luffy said, and the rabbit nodded while Pedro gave a firm nod as well. Alongside them, a samurai would also be on the main ship to serve as a guide to Wano. Luffy contacted once the ship began its departure preparations. However, he couldn't control the elephant over 35 kilometers tall, so the minks would travel on ships. Luffy had a plan for this: they would pass throughs and add the minks to the fleet. At least those who would fight alongside them. Luffy spent some time with his son while everyone got settled. He eventually handed the child back to Yuta, who needed to place him with the others. It was at that moment someone landed on the deck, displaying pink hair. "There are so many pink-haired people in my life," Luffy couldn't help but mutter, thinking of all the women with that hair color who were connected to him. "Humphrey." A scoff came from Perona, floating above the ship with her ghosts. But it wasn't her Luffy was referring to, nor was it the person who had just arrived. Instead, it was Lola, who appeared with her bright smile and an appearance reminiscent of Big Mom in her prime. Equally stunning as Yamato, Shirahoshi, or Boa Hancock, among the most beautiful women. "My husband!" Lola exclaimed, jumping on Luffy and pressing his head into her chest, burying him in her embrace as she squeezed his head. "Stop that, Lola. I'm organizing things," Luffy demanded, grabbing her arms and pushing her away, too busy with his immense responsibilities to entertain her antics. "Don't act like that, my husband," she said, flashing a mischievous smile. "So, you're coming with us?" Luffy asked, changing the subject as he gave her a serious look. "Of course I am. I'd like to see my family. You said my twin sister is married. I want to show off my husband after 4,500 rejected marriage proposals," she said with the same smile. "You really shouldn't treat that as a joke," Luffy said, frowning at her humor before his expression turned serious again. "All right, you'll come on the ship with us," he declared, and she smiled brightly. She settled onto the ship, placing a suitcase in Luffy's and his wife's quarters, when her Den Mushi began to ring. "Fleet Admiral. The Grand Tesoro is ready." Tesoro's voice came from the other end. "That's great. Start leaving the port, it's almost time for us to depart," Luffy replied, hanging up the Den Mushi. His gaze shifted to one of the distant islands as a smile formed on his face. "Hey, Yamato," Luffy called to the girl. "Some visitors I've been expecting just arrived. If anyone asks about me, tell them I've gone to take care of something quickly. I'll be back soon," he said. Luffy spoke as he spread his wings and, under everyone's watchful eyes, shot into the sky. He sped straight ahead at high speed, passing Dressrosa and another island before arriving at the shores of a third. He landed on the beach and looked ahead, spotting a man swimming and dragging a piece of land on his back through the currents. Luffy calmly waited for him to reach the shore, observing with a smile. After emerging from the water, the man began pulling the chains that dragged massive chunks of earth onto the middle of the beach. "You finally arrived," Luffy said with a grin. "We hit some storms, but it was a smooth journey." The person replied as Luffy wondered how they had managed to cross the red line with that chunk of island. He hadn't expected them to bring their bar along. "Don't look at me like that, Mugiwara boy. I said I'd come, but I didn't say I'd be here without my bar," a woman remarked as she opened the bar's door, noticing what Luffy had been thinking. "Well, this is pretty unusual, but it's great to have you here," Luffy commented. After all, Rayleigh had come at Luffy's request to protect the kingdoms while Luffy went to the war in Wano. With Rayleigh, Patrick Red, and a few other crew members and fleet allies, Dressrosa would be safe under such powerful protection. After all, the world government couldn't launch a major attack while the Reverie of Kings was underway in Mary Joy's. "I came because I saw your proposal that you wouldn't tax my bar," Shakayaku said, and Luffy smiled at the mercenary. "Of course not. You're exempt and can sell wherever you want. You can even open a branch in the kingdoms," Luffy said, shrugging. She seemed pleased, already thinking about her profits. "Are there gambling houses here?" Rayleigh asked, as Luffy flashed a more mischievous smile. "There are a few. But I'm sure one of them will catch your interest. Some friends from your past. I'm certain you'll get along well with them," Luffy remarked mysteriously, satisfied that Dressrosa would be protected by people with such legendary power. Chapter 439, Departing for Waro 2. Luffy returned to the port along with his companions while having to carry Rayleigh and his wife, along with the entire bar, through the air, thanks to his strength and ability to fly. He flew directly back to the port where the ships were preparing to set sail. It didn't take long for him to place the Shaki's rip-off bar on the ground. "Rayleigh!" Lucy exclaimed upon seeing her trainer there. "Oh, Lucy, how have you been?" Rayleigh smiled as he saw her again. "We're good, and you too, Shakayaku. Will you be staying in Dressrosa?" "Luffy said you'd be here," Lucy said, smiling. While Lucy was talking to Rayleigh and his wife, Luffy returned to the main ship, where his entire crew, except for Lucy, was gathered at the port, waiting for the ship to finally depart. He ignored the others as he returned to his initial spot full of Den Mushi, connecting them all. "How are we looking for departure?" Luffy asked. "We're ready, Admiral," replied one distinctive Den Mushi. "We're ready too," another one said. "The Grand Tesoro is ready to set sail at your command. We'll be ready in 10 minutes as well. We're just waiting for your order to depart. We only need to load a few more weapon supplies." The Den Mushi began chiming in from all the captains, reporting their statuses. Luffy listened attentively from his spot, nodding at each report. "Very well. Those not ready yet, let me know when you are. Everyone else, be prepared to start moving," he ordered, and all the Den Mushi acknowledged, continuing their preparations to set off at any moment. Luffy observed the last crew members boarding the ship. Some headed to the port to speak with Rayleigh and his wife, but others were arriving as well. Rebecca's own father appeared, approaching alongside his daughter, hopping on one leg using moonwalk. He declared that he, too, would join the war, as he didn't want to leave his daughter alone in this battle. Another person who appeared was Lola, who arrived leaping through the air with a backpack on her back, landing in front of Luffy. "You really want to do this, Lola? You know facing your mother won't be easy," Luffy said, addressing her. "That's exactly why I want to go, my husband. It's time to face that family again. Besides, I want to ensure some of my siblings don't die in this war." Lola responded with determination. Luffy nodded, understanding her reasons. She cared about the Charlotte family despite all the issues with her mother and her madness, which was understandable. After all, having a mother like Big Mom didn't seem healthy for any child. It was curious to observe Lola, who resembled Big Mom in her prime before aging and gaining weight. This resemblance would surely impress her siblings, and in addition, her strength was remarkable. Perhaps not as powerful as the 3 strongest in the family but still superior to the rest. "I'm taking my things to your room," Lola said as she boarded the ship with her backpack, planning to share the space with Luffy. He shrugged and continued supervising the fleet's preparations. Shortly after, the Den Mushi began ringing again. "We're ready to set sail, Admiral." "Straw Hat, I'm ready. Heading to Wano." "All ships are ready." The confirmations came in as Luffy listened carefully. When the last captain gave their approval, he took a deep breath, satisfied. "That's great. Get everyone ready. We'll depart on my order," Luffy said, and then returned to his crew, who were outside the ship. "Let's go, everyone. The entire fleet is ready. We're setting sail now." he commanded. Lucy, Nami, Vivi, and Robin, who had been talking with Shaki, nodded and returned to the ship. Nearby, the King of Dressrosa and the King of Prudence watched from the port. Also present were Red Patrick, Fujitora, and others who would remain to protect their territories and families, along with the crew. Good luck. Say goodbye to your parents. Gloriosa said, holding all 6 of Luffy's children around her as she approached Rayleigh and Shaki, watching them finally depart. Good luck. Don't lose this fight, Straw Hat. The King of Prudence said, crossing his arms. Don't worry. From now on, we won't just face Kaido and Big Mom, but we also won't lose a single fight. Luffy replied with a smile, then turned back to Gloriosa. Goodbye, my children. Daddy will be back soon. Luffy said as the mothers on the ship and others nearby waved their farewells as well. He now set that aside and gave his final instructions to his crew. Well, let's get started, then. He said, watching everyone board the ship and prepare. Those with specific tasks rushed to adjust the sails, prepare the helm, and check the ship's overall condition and route. Attention, everyone. We're departing now. Luffy ordered his crew and the Den Machi connected to the fleet. Quickly, a flurry of activity began at the port of Dressrosa and across the islands in the territory. The ships began moving, heading out to sea under the watchful eyes of everyone present. Ha, finally. Lucy exclaimed, running to the bow of the ship and sitting on Ifrit's head on the Black Pearl, as the main ship moved away from the port. More and more ships began to follow them, all sailing toward the open sea. The atmosphere was vibrant with excitement about finally facing a new challenge after the war. Luffy also approached the bow, standing behind Lucy. He looked back and saw a massive fleet of ships following them. These weren't just from Dressrosa but also from other places. Small, medium, large, and even giant ships. There were also floating island ships and the Gran Tesoro, standing out as a golden floating city. His expression showed satisfaction as he observed an entire fleet advancing into the sea with full force. Hancock was aboard the Kuja pirates' ship. Although she wanted to sail on the same ship as Luffy, she still had responsibilities to her own crew. As they moved forward, the Serpents pushed their ship, and her crew was fully prepared for combat after more than a year of training. The fleet was divided among several ships, and Luffy had the records of all of them in his papers as he continued to observe the vessels. Fleet Crew 1 Captain, Boa Hancock Captain's Bounty, 1,659,000,000 main members, Boa Sandersonia, Boa Marigold Crew Name, Kuja Pirates Crew Size, 120 Amazons Number of ships, 1 Crew Abilities, the 6 most powerful combat styles. Haki, some had awakened Haki before the 1-year training period, and now they are skilled in the use of observation and armament Haki, capable of surpassing high-level pirates in the New World. Fleet Crew 2 Captain, Marguerite Captain's Bounty, no bounty recorded, main members, Ran, Daisy, Sweet Pea, a Flandre Crew Name, second ship of the Kuja Pirates Crew Size, 80 Amazons Number of ships, 1 Crew Abilities, the 6 most powerful combat styles. Haki, proficient in the use of observation and armament Haki, capable of surpassing medium-level pirates in the New World. Specialize in combat with spears and arrows infused with armament Haki. Fleet Crew 3 Captain, Foxy Captain's Bounty, 24 million main members, Portia, Hamburg Crew Name, Foxy Pirates Crew Size, approximately 500 members Number of ships, 1 Crew Abilities, the 6 most powerful combat styles. Haki, skilled in the use of observation and armament Haki, capable of surpassing medium-level pirates in the New World. Fleet Crew 4 Captain, Bellamy Captain's Bounty, 195 million main members, Sarquis, Eddie, Rivers Crew Name, Bellamy Pirates Crew Size, 70 members Number of ships, 1 Crew Abilities, the 6 most powerful combat styles. Haki, skilled in the use of observation and armament Haki, capable of surpassing medium to high-level pirates in the New World. Fleet Crew 5 Captain, Bartolomeo Captain's Bounty, 200 million main members, Gambia, Maynard Crew Name, Bardo Club Pirates Crew Size, 56 members Number of ships, 1 Crew Abilities, the 6 most powerful combat styles. Haki, skilled in the use of observation and armament Haki, capable of surpassing medium to high-level pirates in the New World. Fleet Crew 6 Captain, Wiper Captain's Bounty, no bounty recorded, main members, Kamakiri, Rocky, Bram Crew Name, Shandia Warriors Crew Size, 180 warriors Number of ships, 3 Crew Abilities, the 6 most powerful combat styles. Haki, skilled in the use of observation and armament Haki, capable of surpassing medium to high-level pirates in the New World. Specialists in the use of dials, impact, reject, and others, combining Skypia technology with high-intensity combat. Fleet Crew 7 Captain, Page 1 Captain's Bounty, 290 million main members, no highlighted members, crew name, Dinosaur fleet crew size, approximately 2,000 highly trained and modified dinosaurs. Number of ships, 1. Island ship. Crew abilities, genetically modified dinosaurs captured from Little Garden. They do not use the 6 combat styles but are extremely intelligent and capable of using armament and observation hockey, making them formidable in combat. Dinosaurs utilize brute strength and basic coordinated strategies under the direct command of Page 1. Fleet Crew 8 Captain, Greg, Giant Gorilla, Captain's Bounty, no bounty recorded, main members, no highlighted members, crew name, Giant Animal Fleet Crew size, approximately 5,000 giant animals, lions, giraffes, and others. Number of ships, 1. Island ship. Crew abilities, common giant animals with enhanced intelligence and the ability to follow orders. They do not use the 6 combat styles but are extremely strong and utilize armament and observation hockey, making them dangerous in combat. Combat relies on brute force and coordinated strategies under the direct command of Greg. Fleet Crew 9 Captains, Dory and Brogy. Captain's Bounties, Dory, 100 million. Brogy, 100 million. Main members, only Dory and Brogy. Crew name, Giant Warriors of Elbaf. Crew size, 2, only the captains. Number of ships, 1. Crew abilities, extremely skilled swordsman, combining brute strength with refined techniques. The 6 most powerful combat styles. Hockey, mastery in the use of armament and observation hockey, placing them on the level of a 4 Emperor's commander in terms of power. Extensive experience and skill in naval and land combat, accumulated over centuries of battles. Fleet Crew 10 Captain, Guild Tesoro. Captain's Bounty, 1,500,000,000. Main members, Bakura, Mr. Tanaka, Dice. Crew name, Grand Tesoro. Crew size, approximately 3,000 members, including elites and subordinate workers. Number of ships, 1. Crew abilities, gold manipulation through the gold fruit model, gold human devil fruit, used by the captain for large-scale offense and defense, empowering the entire crew. The 6 most powerful combat styles. Hockey, many members have developed skills in observation and armament hockey, making the crew formidable in combat. Fleet Crew 11 Captain, Chinjiao. Captain's Bounty, 542 million. Main members, Sai, Bu. Crew name, Hapo Navy. Crew size, approximately 800 warriors. Number of ships, 10. Crew abilities, Masters of the Hapo Navy combat style, a unique technique blending brute strength with martial arts and specialized weapon techniques. The 6 most powerful combat styles. Hockey, many members, including the captain and Sai, possess skills in observation and armament hockey, capable of challenging high-level pirates in the New World. Fleet Crew 12 Captain, Orlumbus. Captain's Bounty, no known bounty. Main members, no highlighted members. Crew name, Yanta Maria. Grand Fleet. Crew size, approximately 4,300 warriors. Number of ships, 56. Crew abilities, soldiers organized into tactical formations, functioning as a true naval army. The 6 most powerful combat styles. Hockey, fleet leaders possess skills in observation and armament hockey, while the rest of the warriors rely on brute strength and basic combat techniques. Equipped with naval weaponry and supplies for prolonged campaigns. Fleet Crew 13 Captain, Ideo. Captain's Bounty, 150 million. Main members, Blue Gilly, Abdullah, Jeet. Crew name, Ideo Pirates. Crew size, approximately 50 members. Number of ships, 1. Crew abilities, Masters of Martial Arts, with a special focus on hand-to-hand combat and traditional combat styles. The 6 most powerful combat styles. Hockey, some members, including Ideo, possess skills in observation and armament hockey, providing an edge in battles against medium to high-level pirates in the New World. A ship well adapted for swift missions and direct combat, emphasizing efficiency and speed. Fleet Crew 14 Captain, Cavendish. Captain's Bounty, 330 million. Main members, Farrell, Cavendish's personal horse. Crew name, Beautiful Pirates. Crew size, approximately 75 members. Number of ships, 1. Crew abilities, Cavendish, an extraordinary swordsman, is known for his split personality, Death Knight, making him extremely dangerous. The 6 most powerful combat styles. Hockey, Cavendish possesses skills in observation and armament hockey, capable of rivaling elite swordsmen. He also gained control over his other personality after intense training with Luffy for a month. Fleet Crew 15 Captain, Hadruden. Captain's Bounty, 150 million. Main members, Stanson, Rode, Gerd, Goldberg. Crew name, Dressrosa. Giant Pirates. Crew size, 5 giants. Number of ships, 1. Crew abilities, Hadruden and his crew possess overwhelming physical strength, capable of causing mass destruction in naval and land combat. The 6 most powerful combat styles. Hockey, all members possess observation and armament hockey, equivalent to elites in combat. These were the most well-known members, bringing the total to over 16,000 members. However, there are others, less renowned, who also formed part of the fleet, completing nearly 18,000 men in total and 25 pirate captains. Fleet Crew 16 Captain, Region Captain's Bounty, 320 million main members, Ayaka, Sniper, Jamo, Swordsman, Crew Name, Deep Sea Pirates Crew Size, 150 Fishman Number of ships, 2 Crew Abilities, Masters of Fishman Karate, focusing on both underwater and surface combat. The 6 most powerful combat styles. Hockey, many members possess observation and armament hockey, making them a lethal force at sea. Fleet Crew 17 Captain, Illyria Captain's Bounty, 270 million main members, Zephyr, Strategist, Claudia, Sharpshooter, Crew Name, Warriors of the City of Angels Crew Size, 120 Celestial Warriors Number of ships, 2 Crew Abilities, Specialists in Advanced Dials and Aerial Combat. The 6 most powerful combat styles. Hockey, the captain and her lieutenants possess observation and armament hockey, along with agile maneuvers to confuse enemies. Fleet Crew 18 Captain, Zane Captain's Bounty, 150 million main members, Arlo, Engineer, Myra, Navigator, Crew Name, Black Claw Pirates Crew Size, 80 members Number of ships, 1 Crew Abilities, Specialists in Stealth, Sabotage, and Ambushes. The 6 most powerful combat styles. Hockey, some members possess basic hockey skills. Fleet Crew 19 Captain, Pharaoh Captain's Bounty, 300 million main members, Mina, Sharpshooter, Vaulter, Gunner, Crew Name, Iron Corsairs Crew Size, 200 members Number of ships, 3 Crew Abilities, utilize advanced combat technology and weaponry. The 6 most powerful combat styles. Hockey, some members possess basic hockey skills. Fleet Crew 20 Captain, Raido Captain's Bounty, 210 million main members, Aiko, Navigator, Taro, Fighter, Crew Name, Southern Thunder Pirates Crew Size, 100 members Number of ships, 1 Crew Abilities, Specialists in Climate Manipulation and Rapid Strikes. The 6 most powerful combat styles. Hockey, the captain and some members possess basic hockey skills. Fleet Crew 21 Captain, Gale Captain's Bounty, 250 million main members, Arya, Scout, Gust, Gunner, Crew Name, Rebels of the Cutting Wind Crew Size, 150 members Number of ships, 3 Crew Abilities, Masters of Agile Combat, using wind-based tactical weapons. The 6 most powerful combat styles. Hockey, some members possess basic hockey skills. Fleet Crew 22 Captain, Glacius Captain's Bounty, 400 million main members, Freya, Archer, Bjorn, Warrior, Crew Name, Ice Dragons Crew Size, 220 members Number of ships, 4 Crew Abilities, utilize freezing weapons and cold-based techniques. The 6 most powerful combat styles. Hockey, some members possess basic hockey skills. Fleet Crew 23 Captain, Dune Captain's Bounty, 190 million main members, Zara, Strategist, Lumo, Swordsman, Crew Name, Sandcorsairs Crew Size, 140 members Number of ships, 2 Crew Abilities, Specialists in Combat in Extreme Environments, with Desert-Adapted Weaponry. The 6 most powerful combat styles. Hockey, some members possess basic hockey skills. Fleet Crew 24 Captain, Typhoon Captain's Bounty, 310 million main members, Marina, Navigator, Blitz, Fighter, Crew Name, Storm Travelers Crew Size, 180 members Number of ships, 3 Crew Abilities, Specialists in Combat in Violent Seas, utilizing advanced navigation and hockey. The 6 most powerful combat styles. Hockey, some members possess basic hockey skills. Fleet Crew 25 Captain, Falker Captain's Bounty, 200 million main members, Dre, Strategist, Vera, Medic, Crew Name, Black Hawks Crew Size, 300 members Number of ships, 5 Crew Abilities, combines brute strength with coordinated aerial and naval attacks. The 6 most powerful combat styles. Hockey, some members possess basic hockey skills. As the ships began to move away, heading toward the horizon, a group of individuals in a distant spot tried to spy on them with a telescope. Damn it. We couldn't get the message out that they're departing. A man dressed in black muttered in frustration. They were agents of the CP, assigned to spy on the Straw Hats and report their activities in real time to their superiors. However, Enel had blocked all communications within and outside the region, making any contact with the world government impossible. They couldn't even take photos, as all Dendenmushi had been affected. Except for those used by the Straw Hat fleet. It wasn't just this group. Across various parts of the sea, other teams were trying to monitor the fleet's movements, but all of them found their communication systems rendered useless. The world government was desperate to update its information on the Straw Hats, but it faced an insurmountable obstacle with this ability. Enel's power to block communications made their operations even more dangerous. He could attack and destroy enemies without giving them a chance to call for reinforcements or warn allies. This strategy constantly put the government at a disadvantage, especially with the abilities of Luffy's allies, such as the Dorador fruit model, Dimensional Gate Devil fruit, once belonging to Blueno, now in the hands of someone else. The Cypher Paul agents could only watch helplessly as the Straw Hats disappeared over the horizon, unable to follow them. Any attempt at confrontation would be annihilated by Luffy's powerful fleet, which was advancing at full speed toward war. Chapter 440, Mysterious Seven Warlords of the Seas 01. A few days had passed since the entire Mugiwara fleet began sailing the seas. The speed of the 92 ships, carrying 18,000 men and 26 captains, was quite slow. After all, there were colossal ships among them. Still, Luffy managed to enhance the fleet's strength by awakening his More fruit model, Amplify Human Devil fruit. He already had enough control over it to trigger its awakening and, even without using its full power, was able to expand its effects over large areas. One of its abilities allowed him to improve the speed of numerous objects, including his entire fleet. However, it wasn't so fast as to rush the journey too much, as he had other plans in mind to accomplish. About halfway through their journey, in just 2 days, they spotted a ship waiting for them in the middle of the ocean. It was none other than the ships of Z, flying the flag of the Mink tribe. They had been in communication ever since Alvida delivered a Dendenmushi to them. Earlier, before the fleet departed from Dressrosa, Luffy contacted them, and they confirmed they would aid him in Wano. Quickly, Z's ship joined them as the fleet passed by. As they approached, Luffy landed on their ship to greet them. "Welcome aboard," Luffy said, landing on the deck crowded with minks. "So, you're Monkey D. Luffy?" Nekomamushi said, analyzing him carefully, while Inuarashi remained silent beside him. "You could say that," Luffy replied, flashing a grin. "Either way, it's great to have you here. I'm sure we'll avenge Oden, defeat Kaido, and make him pay for everything he's done over the past 20 years. You talk as if you really care about Wano, knowing you intend to place this territory under your control." Nekomamushi retorted, giving Luffy a sharp look. Yes, he was powerful. Far more than that mink who had fought and defeated them effortlessly. But they needed to test his character. After all, they didn't want another Kaido. Luffy understood the reason for their distrust and smiled warmly. "Don't worry about that," Luffy replied. "I'm not that kind of person. I'm going to Wano to help liberate the country. I have a crewmate who is Kaido's own daughter, but Oden's will lives on in her. Ever since she read his journal, her dream has been to free Wano. As her crewmate, and now her husband, I'm going to help her achieve that dream." He paused before continuing. "That's why I assembled my crew and went to sea. All my crewmates have clear goals. Even those who seemed lost, who joined us by chance, carry their own dreams. As their captain, I'm determined to help them achieve those dreams above all else. Taking Wano out of Kaido's hands has been part of my plans since the East Blue." "I see. I hope you stay true to those words," Inuarashi said, now observing Luffy intently. "We won't be your subordinates, but we'll stand as your allies, even after this war," Nekomamushi added incisively. "We'll see," Luffy replied with a smile, confident they would eventually join his fleet in the future. "So be it, Monkey D. Luffy," Nekomamushi murmured. Luffy shrugged before continuing. "Anyway, I'm heading back to the flagship. If you need anything, use the Dendenmushi to get in touch. Safe travels." He turned away and disappeared, moving swiftly back to the Black Pearl. After chatting briefly with his new allies, he finally landed back on the ship, where he found his crewmates, along with the additional members who weren't part of the main crew, busy with their tasks. Meanwhile, he relaxed, sunbathing with some of his wives and observing the fleet as it advanced. As the fleet's admiral, Luffy also had to oversee and resolve any problems, including disputes among the captains. With so many captains gathered, conflicts naturally arose from time to time, even though they were all there for Luffy, sharing a common interest. Sometimes, he had to talk to or even fight them. Other times, he sent Hugo, who resolved issues with his brute strength. The ships sailed for over 2 more days before Luffy called everyone together for a more serious discussion. "It'll still take about a week for us to reach Wano's territory," he began. "It's time to proceed with the plan." The crew listened attentively, though they already knew the captain's plan before setting sail, as Luffy had needed to address some important matters and had shared the plan with everyone during their meeting in Skypiea. "Bippo, I'm counting on you to lead the fleet," Luffy called out, offering a few words of encouragement. Bippo looked at him with a goofy expression, unable to respond. Suddenly, Usopp appeared behind him with an object in his hands, placing a wig on Bippo's head. Instantly, Bippo changed. His eyes sparkled with confidence, and a smile spread across his face. "Of course, Captain. I'll get started right away," he said calmly, jumping off the ship to begin coordinating with the other vessels. Although Luffy had expected this to happen a little later, he accepted that it was the right moment, especially since there was no one watching them. Neither from the sea nor the sky. Maintaining the element of surprise was critical. Earlier, he had driven off Morgan by asking Enel to keep an eye on him from above, as Morgan had been persistently taking photos of the fleet. Meanwhile, Bippo began touching each of the 92 ships, one by one. By the time he finished, Luffy decided it was time to leave and turned to his sister. "It's time to go, sister," he said. She nodded. "All right, Luffy. I'm ready," she replied, carrying a sack full of meat over her shoulder. "Take this," she added with a goofy grin, handing him the sack of meat he had asked Raja to prepare. Luffy laughed as he accepted the sack, shrinking it until it fit into his pocket. "Let's go. See you later, everyone. Catch you soon." He returned to his crew, grabbed his sister by the waist, and, without warning, unfolded his wings. In an instant, they shot into the sky, disappearing from the ship. He climbed to a considerable height and veered in a different direction from the fleet. "This is so much fun," Lucy exclaimed, exhilarated by her brother's incredible speed as they vanished from sight. "We'll be bored for a while." "I'll go train," Zoro muttered. After all, without Luffy, they wouldn't be attacking Wano just yet. Kuina followed him to the training area, along with some other crew members. As Bippo finished touching all the ships, the fleet began to lift off the ocean. Small ships and even island-sized vessels started levitating one by one, rising into the sky. Bippo controlled everything with his powers, and the fleet now traveled through the air instead of over the sea, heading for Wano at a steady speed, unseen by anyone. Luffy was the only 4 emperors whose fleet could fly through the skies. Meanwhile, Luffy and Lucy, having separated from the fleet, sped forward at incredible speed using the power of the more fruit model, Amplify Human Devil Fruit. After crossing many islands and other kingdoms, they arrived at a specific island a few hours later. They advanced into the center of a simple port town. This was one of the kingdoms whose king was absent, as he had traveled to marry Joyce. The kingdom's strongest forces were concentrated in the capital, as pirates in the surrounding waters had grown bolder. With the king and his top fighters away, escorting a royal voyage alongside the navy, the coastal villages were vulnerable and had started to suffer attacks from pirates eager to plunder. Upon approaching one of these villages, however, they didn't encounter the chaos seen in other villages. Instead, the streets were littered with blood and the corpses of pirates. The terrified villagers were busy cleaning up the bodies. The one responsible for the carnage was inside a tavern, and everyone seemed afraid of him. "What happened here?" Lucy murmured, surprised by the sight of so many dead pirates. Though she disliked seeing dead bodies, she had to accept that such scenes were common in this world. "Let's just say there's a 7 warlords of the seas here," Luffy commented calmly. "A 7 warlords of the seas? Is that why we're here?" she asked, confused. After all, Luffy had mentioned they had another objective. She hadn't expected to end up in a place with a 7 warlords of the seas, but she didn't seem worried. She trusted her brother completely, and he always seemed to know what he was doing. "Yes, but it's a 7 warlords of the seas I've already spoken to and kept in contact with over the past month. We arranged to meet here," Luffy revealed. They moved through the town, avoiding exposing their identities by wearing hoods. As they walked, they reached a completely empty bar, with only a bartender present. The sole customer there was drinking calmly, while the bartender watched him cautiously. The man stopped drinking and glanced to the side, noticing who was approaching. He knew very well who was there, as Luffy's presence was overwhelming for skilled observation hockey users. "You actually came. I read in the paper that you're headed to Wano," he commented suddenly. The bartender, though confused because he didn't recognize Luffy under the hood, didn't pry, considering the type of dangerous customer already present. The man at the bar had mercilessly killed all the pirates who invaded the village, leaving the residents terrified by the brutality of his actions. Even though he worked for the government, his savagery was frightening. "I'd prefer you didn't talk so openly about that right now. Let's leave, we need to talk," Luffy said, as Lucy watched him, a little puzzled. She put a finger to her mouth, thinking, but chose to stay silent, trusting Luffy to handle the situation. The man stood up, tossed a bag of gold coins onto the counter, but the bartender seemed reluctant to accept the money. "Sir, you don't need to pay. After all, you saved the town." The bartender tried to argue. "Forget it. I'm not so poor that I'd accept scraps from someone as inferior as you. I killed those pirates for fun, to relieve the boredom of waiting for this man over the past month." The man replied arrogantly and disdainfully, while the bartender trembled. "Why is this guy such an idiot?" Lucy murmured. Luffy smiled at her comment. "It seems this fool doesn't even try to hide his true nature, But it doesn't matter. He'll be dead by the end of this journey, Luffy thought to himself, watching the man approach. This man had tried to join Luffy's crew ever since they crossed paths in Dressrosa, but Luffy had ignored him for an entire month. However, he had decided to re-establish contact, arranging this meeting to resolve the situation before it turned into a bigger problem. Before stepping into Wano, there were still several matters Luffy needed to address. Chapter 441, Mysterious Seven Warlords of the Seas 02. At the end, they were accompanied by the 7 warlords of the seas, who led them to a part of the island where the man had left his ship. Luffy asked him to let them use his vessel to continue their journey. What an ugly ship. Lucy stopped in front of it and exclaimed, staring at the overly extravagant thing. The ship was made of gold and adorned with precious stones. The worst part was that it had the head of a world noble, even wearing an astronaut's helmet, entirely crafted in the aesthetic of the Tenryou Obito. Yet, there were attempts to poorly disguise it, and anyone with 2 brain cells could see through the pathetic attempt. The man had placed a hat over the Tenryou Obito's head, sunglasses over the astronaut's helmet, and a scarf around its neck in a weak effort to conceal the identity. Luffy stared at it, his mouth slightly open, unable to believe what he was seeing. Can this guy really be so dumb and shameless at the same time? Couldn't he have just taken another ship and left this one behind? Luffy thought, observing the design that blatantly revealed who the owner was. The man seemed displeased by Lucy's comment, unwilling to accept anyone daring to insult his ship. Something he considered a masterpiece among the Tenryou Obito, enough to make his peers envious. How dare you speak about my ship like that, you damn. He couldn't even finish his sentence because Luffy suddenly looked at him, releasing an immense pressure. What did you just say? Luffy asked sharply, his piercing gaze stopping the man in his tracks and making his eyes widen. This holy knight, even as one of the 7 most powerful, possessing strength equivalent to an admiral, knew it wasn't enough to confront the man in front of him. Besides, he had an urgent mission. Damn it, focus on the mission, he murmured internally, feeling nervous. His lips began trembling, but he forced a smile, as if slapping his own Tenryou Obito pride. Forgive me if my ship doesn't please you, Miss Lucy. He said, each word sounding like a knife stabbing his heart. Speaking to someone so beneath him was humiliating. Oh, no problem, dude. You're really kind. Lucy said with an enthusiastic smile. Anyway, I still think this ship is horrible, a baka ship. She added, keeping her smile as if she hadn't just insulted him. The 7 warlords of the seas debated internally whether or not he should kill the girl, but with Luffy there, he knew he had to tread carefully. Remember the mission, he repeated to himself, forcing another smile to mask his frustration. Luffy observed the entire exchange and simply sighed. Let's go. Anyway, are we continuing on your ship or not? I'm getting a bit tired of flying. Luffy said, feigning nonchalance. The man quickly nodded. Of course, let's proceed. And so, everyone boarded the bizarre ship. Where's the kitchen? Lucy asked immediately. The 7 warlords of the seas, feeling immense nervousness at the thought of someone inferior touching his precious ship, hesitated once again, but under Luffy's sharp gaze, he quickly gestured with his hand. It's right over there, Miss Lucy. Please, make yourself at home. He murmured, trying to sound amiable. Lucy darted off, already starving, without even asking her brother for her bag of meat, preferring to grab things quickly from the kitchen. Well, let's get started. Luffy said seriously, turning to the man. You sought me out to join my crew. But tell me, exactly, why do you want to abandon the government and join me? A criminal wanted across the world and, as far as I know, the most wanted man alive right now. Luffy asked, maintaining a firm tone and staring at him with sharp eyes. Lord Luffy, I am a great admirer of your work over the past years. The man began, forcing a smile that barely concealed his tension. I follow each of your feats. I would very much like to be recruited and follow you. He continued, but the lack of sincerity in his words was evident even to someone who didn't use observation hockey. I already have a fan club in my fleet. I don't need another one. Tell me the real reason you want to join my crew. Don't give me this foolish talk. Luffy said in a not-so-friendly tone, staring him down. He wanted to test how far the man would go. The 7 warlords of the seas looked at him, a little concerned, but eventually nodded. I'd like to expose myself to the world government, he replied, lying once again. Luffy raised an eyebrow, wondering what excuse the man would come up with now, and continued. Tell me more about that, he said, as the man seemed to debate with himself about what to say. Inside, the 7 warlords of the seas thought, I want to join your crew to steal information and pass it on to my superiors before we destroy all of you. I also plan to kill you and your sister, you damned inferior beings who dare to challenge us 7 warlords of the seas. The true gods of this world. If he had been honest, That's what he would have said. Instead, he swallowed hard and kept speaking in a much more polite tone to mask his true intentions, scratching his hands as if in submission. I had some issues with the powerful and divine Tenri Obito. He began, while Luffy looked at him as if he were an idiot, clearly not hiding his Tenri Obito pride. But Luffy let him continue, watching him closely. My family was killed. I know you're a hero to many after finally taking revenge on the powerful Tenri Obito, and I'd like to help you take them down. He said. But the feelings behind his words were completely opposite to what he was saying. Let me join. Let me join, you bastard. I'll kill you. This was the man's true thought as he waited for Luffy's response, who seemed to cross his arms and think about what he had heard. Well, I might accept you, but first, you'll have to pass a test. Luffy finally said. What kind of test would that be, Lord Luffy? I'm ready to follow you at any moment. He replied immediately. Good, that's great, since we're leaving right now. Luffy said with a smile. Wait, leaving? Lord Luffy, aren't you going to Wano? The man asked, a little cautiously. Luffy shook his head. No, I don't plan to go to Wano. That was just bait for the world government. He said calmly, lying to the liar, of course. The man nodded, keeping this information to himself, thinking about how he could pass it on to his superiors later. Besides, Luffy continued. I still don't know your name. He said. You don't know? The man seemed very offended. He had been saying his name all month trying to get in touch, and it was plastered in the newspapers as a 7 warlords of the seas. It was impossible for Luffy not to know his name, and he felt extremely insulted. But the disguised Holy Knight tried to control his anger, scratching his throat as he spoke in a gentle tone. I am Saint. I mean, Almer, just Almer. He said, a bit nervous after nearly letting his Tenri Obito name slip. Luffy nodded anyway. Then I want you to do something immediately. Set the ship on his course. He said, handing an eternal pose to the man before heading to the kitchen to meet his sister, leaving the 7 warlords of the seas alone. The man looked at both the eternal pose and Luffy's back disappearing into the kitchen. Once alone, he gritted his teeth, openly displaying his anger, gripping the eternal pose furiously. He hated receiving orders from someone he considered inferior and was about to smash the object, letting his rage boil over, but a voice stopped him. Hey, don't even think about breaking that. Luffy's voice came from inside the kitchen, making the man freeze. He quickly lowered the eternal pose and forced a well-behaved smile. Of course, Lord Luffy. I'll head there, as you wish. He replied, trying to maintain his composure despite the seething anger inside him. Maintaining an animated but clearly fake expression, the man steered the ship away from the island and began setting it on the indicated route, as Luffy had ordered. It was only after the man finally set the ship on course away from the island that he returned to the kitchen to check on his guests. What he found there was chaotic and disrespectful. While Luffy sat at the table reading the day's newspaper, catching up on more news and rumors about his supposed trip to Wano, as well as reports of kings approaching Mary Joyce and others already arriving. His sister stood in front of the refrigerator, devouring everything he had stocked there. All the extremely expensive and luxurious foods the man had stored before leaving Mary Joyce were disappearing bite by bite into the rubber girl's stomach, which had now swollen into a temporary bloated sphere, making her look comically overweight. These weren't just any foods, they were rare delicacies he could not procure anywhere else in this sea. They hailed from all the blues, the most appetizing and expensive dishes imaginable, worthy of a Tenri Obito's meal. And now, he was losing it all. This infuriated him. At that moment, driven by his rage, seeing an inferior like Lucy innocently devouring everything, he began to walk toward her, teeth clenched. Lucy noticed him with a confused look, sensing his anger with her haki. But before Almer could get any closer, the newspaper came flying at him, smacking him in the face. Hey, can you tell me what you think about this? Luffy asked, still calm, trying to avoid killing the Tenri Obito too soon. After all, if he attacked his sister, it would be a painful death for him. The man tried to calm himself, reminded of Luffy's presence, and picked up the newspaper. The headlines were about the king's meeting. This, Lord Luffy. He seemed a bit lost before replying, but once again adopted a submissive tone. Well, it's a world government meeting to maintain their authority and power. All those kings and queens must obey the mighty and divine Tenri Obito. He said with arrogance. Lucy, across the kitchen, was inspired by the man's behavior, finding him a complete idiot. Luffy, on the other hand, debated whether he should kill him earlier than planned. Despite being an arrogant fool, he also found him entertaining. After all, it wasn't every day you saw a Tenri Obito trying to become your subordinate. Well, I think this meeting will be historic for this era. I've heard some rumors that the 7 Warlords of the Seas program might be abolished during this gathering. Luffy commented calmly. The man looked stunned. Wait, how do you? How does Lord Luffy know that? He exclaimed, astonished. Lucy raised an eyebrow, confused. What's with the surprise? She asked as she stood, biting into a pink lobster straight from the South Blue. A rarity that only produced 10 kilograms per year. About that. I'm just a bit surprised. He tried to compose himself. Are you sure about this, Luffy? He asked, ignoring Lucy since getting angry at her now would be pointless, no matter how much she was devouring what he considered precious. Well, I know some interesting things. If you pass the test, I might even tell you. Luffy said in a casual tone. The man quickly nodded. Of course, Lord Luffy. I am at your service. He replied, forcing a friendly smile, even as veins of rage subtly appeared on his forehead while watching Lucy return to the fridge to consume whatever was left. Luffy wanted to laugh at the situation. He found it all incredibly amusing, so long as the man didn't cross the line by trying to attack his sister. They had plenty of fun as they continued along the route, so Luffy quickly sped up the ship. He wanted to reach Zephyr, the Black Fist, as soon as possible. Luffy had a problem. He knew that, at this moment, something grand was being plotted. Something capable of creating massive chaos in the New World and potentially causing the planet's destruction if left unchecked. If Zephyr succeeded, there was no one currently in a position to stop it. The timeline had already been disrupted since Luffy's interference during the Manafort War. That was why Luffy had to act on his own, steering away from the fleet headed to Wano. After all, even as a pirate, the New World was now his home, and he wouldn't allow it to be destroyed. Chapter 442, Neo Marino 1. In the middle of a location in the New World, there was an island being used as a base by the Neo Navy. The island had a somewhat gloomy and gray atmosphere, with the sky covered by dark clouds. At the center of the island stood a robust, fortified installation. Inside, men and women worked tirelessly, moving metal crates containing a rare and explosive material known as dynastones. In other words, explosives. Lots of explosives. Zephyr, now a former admiral of the Navy who referred to himself as Z, stood atop a metal platform, observing the activity below with cold eyes, lost in thought about his plans. Instead of the Navy uniform he once wore, he now donned an outfit that matched his current black cape, adorned with the symbol of his personal crusade. A crusade that symbolized nothing less than the complete destruction of the pirate system and the world government that had betrayed him. His dendenmushi rang at that moment. He raised it to listen to his subordinates. Sir, we are ready to transport the shipment of dynastones directly to the first ends point. The destruction will reach an area of at least 5 surrounding islands. It will be devastating. Zephyr did not respond immediately. His gaze shifted back to the ship being loaded before he finally replied. That is not enough. He said gravely. I want the entire world to see that the monsters they created cannot be controlled. I want fear to consume every corner of the New World. But, sir, if we increase the range, it could include innocent kingdoms. Many lives could be lost. The dendenmushi conveyed a hint of hesitation at the leader's proposal. Innocent people? Zephyr thought. There was a time when he might have cared about such concerns, but now he believed sacrifices were necessary to achieve lasting peace in this world. He then gave his response, his tone firm. There are no innocents in this world. They are all complicit, whether through fear, greed, or complacency. Never forget that we are liberating the world from this evil. While all eyes are on the war between the 4 emperors and the meeting of the kings at Mary Ijo's, we will be creating a better world. He concluded his statement. The person on the dendenmushi swallowed hard and acknowledged the order without further objection. They hung up, knowing that the calculations for destruction would now be adjusted. Zephyr's plan was straightforward. Detonate the 3 endpoints in the New World using the dynastones he had obtained over the past year. By obliterating these 3 locations while keeping the world's attention diverted to other events, he could act much faster. Zephyr's eyes gleamed as he thought about the cursed pirates known as the 4 Emperors fighting each other. He would surprise them with the cataclysmic chain reaction caused by the explosions, which would spread through the volcanic areas, annihilating the entire New World. He would kill them all. All 4 Emperors would be dead before the world even realized what was happening. This will be the first step toward a new world. Zephyr murmured to himself as he walked. A world where corruption will be consumed by fire. He said, a dangerous glint in his eyes. Quickly, 4 ships bearing the Neo Navy's flag were stationed at the base's port. Men continued loading the ships with more explosives than initially planned. Zephyr boarded the main ship as his men worked. 2 of his top students were on the deck, overseeing everything, and the moment they noticed their master, they swiftly approached, striking a salute. They were Ain and Bins. Greetings, Master Z. They said in unison. Zephyr, or Z, nodded as he passed by them, walking toward the other side of the ship to gaze at the ocean. The weather seemed to darken further, signaling an approaching storm. The laws of pirates are simple: the strong shape the world, and the weak are nothing but ashes in the wind. This storm will mark our first act, and the new world, along with its evil, will vanish in another, even greater one. Of fire. Zephyr spoke these words without hesitation, and his subordinates behind him nodded, resolute in following their master's lead. Many other students had been invited to join him, but none accepted when he left. However, the other subordinates handling the loading were all former Marines who believed the government's navy was corrupt. Everything seemed calm until, suddenly, Zephyr narrowed his eyes toward the sea. Ain also noticed something and turned to a man guarding a crate. "Hey, you! Grab your spyglass and look at the sea immediately," she ordered. The man looked confused but quickly fetched the spyglass from his belt and peered out over the water. His expression quickly turned to shock. "There's a ship coming this way. And that flag. It belongs to the Divine Admiral," the man exclaimed, prompting raised eyebrows from everyone nearby. "It's a 7 Warlords of the Seas ship," someone shouted. Ain frowned. "How the hell did they find us here?" "Master Z," she murmured, her gaze falling on Z, who was staring intently at the approaching ship, his eyes glinting. "A 7 Warlords of the Seas," he murmured to himself, his tone dripping with disdain. "That damned government wastes no time, does it? Even so, we shouldn't have been found so easily. Quick, prepare to destroy that ship." The men sprang into action, readying the 4 massive Neo-Navy ships and aiming their cannons toward the sea. "What should we do, Master Z?" Vince asked, while Zephyr kept his gaze locked on the ship. "Sink it," Z commanded. The enemy ship continued speeding toward the island, moving far faster than any ordinary vessel. It soon entered the cannon's range, and in the next moment, the cannons of all 4 Neo-Navy ships roared as they fired, their shots exploding with force and racing toward the target. But something strange happened. As the cannonballs were about to hit, the ship suddenly veered to the side in an almost unnatural manner. "What is that? How can a ship dodge?" Everyone watched in stunned disbelief. More and more cannonballs were fired, but none hit the ship. It continued advancing in a zigzag pattern, evading every attack as it drew closer. Boom. 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 TSK. At this rate, nothing will work. Z clicked his tongue in irritation, watching the ship effortlessly avoid the attacks. Resolving to take matters into his own hands, he strode to the center of the ship. Raising his mechanical arm, he struck one of the crates they had been transporting. Everyone watched in surprise as Z acted, retrieving a capsule containing a Dynastone, which pulsed like a heartbeat within its container. "Master Z," Ain murmured, stunned, as she watched Z break the capsule. Her shock grew. Contact with air would make the stone explode. As the stone began to glow and expand, he gripped it tightly and aimed at the ship. "Let's see you escape this," he said before hurling the stone toward the 7 Warlords of the Seas ship. The Dynastone flew rapidly toward the ship, which this time remained still. As the stone neared, it began to shine and expand, finally detonating right in front of the enemy vessel. In the next moment, a blinding flash engulfed everything, making the storm-darkened new world shine as brightly as day. Then came the deafening explosion as the area before them erupted in chaos. Boom. Despite being half a kilometer away from the explosion, all the ships and the island itself trembled as the Dynastone unleashed its destructive power, devastating the sea ahead. The sheer force of just one fragment of its potential was staggering, and they had plans to use hundreds of these stones to achieve their objectives at the endpoints. As everyone tried to shield themselves, raising their arms against the force of the explosion, Z stood watching with a satisfied look, imagining the devastation his plan would cause at the volcanic points he intended to destroy. But his eyes soon narrowed. The sea began to reappear, revealing a massive crater of water that quickly refilled as the ocean rushed back into place. However, there was no sign of the 7 Warlords of the Seas ship. Suddenly, Z's gaze shifted upward. A figure descended from the sky at an incredible speed, landing with such force on the deck that part of the structure behind Z was destroyed in a powerful blast. Surprised, he turned to see who the intruder was. His eyes quickly scanned the person who had just landed amidst the cloud of dust. Ain and Binz, now on high alert, readied themselves to confront the invader, while the other Neo-Navy members formed ranks, aiming their weapons and drawing swords, acting as disciplined Marines do. "It's been a long time since I last saw you. Even before you betrayed the organization," Z murmured, studying the figure. As the dust began to settle, a young girl with black hair came into view. Z's eyes narrowed. "Lucy," he muttered, recognizing his former Manafort pupil, who had abandoned the Navy to join her pirate brother. "Hello, Z-sensei." Lucy greeted, staring directly at him. "Yes, it has been a long time." Her voice, however, lacked the playful and calm tone it once had. Instead, Every word carried a weight of seriousness. "So, you're with the 7 warlords of the seas?" Z asked, a flicker of confusion in his voice. To him, it would have made more sense for her to be elsewhere. She should have been fighting alongside her brother. "It's hard to explain," Lucy replied. "But I'm here for one thing. I want to know something, and I'd like you to be honest." Z remained silent, his gaze fixed on her, and she continued. "Do you plan to destroy the New World?" she asked directly, her expression growing even more severe. "How do you know that?" Z raised an eyebrow, genuinely surprised. This plan had been in the works for over a year. No one should have known about it except his most trusted subordinates. "Luffy told me," Lucy said candidly. "So, he knew?" Z murmured, his expression darkening. A shadow of concern passed over his face. If Luffy was aware of his plan, though he couldn't fathom how, there might be a traitor among his ranks. But that didn't matter now. If Luffy himself was present, it could prove troublesome, even for him. Despite this, he regarded his former pupil with a serious expression and confirmed, "Yes, it's true. I plan to destroy the New World. That includes you, your brother, and every pirate." "I see," Lucy murmured to herself, glancing around at the Neo Navy members who were preparing to attack at any moment. Her gaze sharpened, becoming even fiercer as she looked back at her old sensei. "Then I'm here to stop you, Z-sensei," she declared, and an explosion of haki emanated from her, unleashing a crushing wave of her sovereign aura. Everyone around felt the overwhelming pressure of her willpower. Chapter 443, Neo Marino 2. Lucy simply unleashed her haki like a wave of force and lightning from the Conqueror, sweeping in all directions and striking everything around her. Zephyr, with an expressionless look behind his glasses, remained unfazed, but the same could not be said for his subordinates. Ain and Binz quickly raised their hands, feeling the immense pressure emanating from Lucy. Although they endured the haki with some difficulty, others were not as resilient. Shizo, El Picachino, Shiro Kuma, and all the other members of the Neo Marines quickly rolled their eyes back and began collapsing, one by one. Z remained silent. Despite losing all his subordinates, he knew there was nothing else to do after Lucy unleashed her strength. His eyes locked onto Lucy, who stared intensely at him following her explosion of power. "Why are you doing this? You should be like me. Or would have been, but you chose to join an evil pirate crew like your brothers. So, you're just as bad as them, Lucy. And yet you're here, trying to lecture me?" Zephyr asked in an angry tone. "You think the fact that I'm with my brother is worse than you wanting to destroy multiple kingdoms at once, Sensei?" Lucy replied, equal anger etched on her face. "Their deaths are necessary to create a better world," Z retorted firmly. "I may have left the Marines without you, but I still have a sense of justice. Even if I'm flying a pirate flag beside my brother, I still desire a better world. And Luffy is not the monster you think he is," Lucy replied, staring directly at him. Ain and Binz quickly prepared to fight, positioning themselves behind Lucy while she stood firm, staring Z down without flinching. "You don't understand, girl. I think you've become a pirate too, Lucy. And I'm going to have to destroy you here because now you're part of that group of monsters," Z shouted, showing his dissatisfaction. The next moment, he clenched his fists and charged directly at Lucy. She didn't stand still. Her fists turned black with armament haki, meeting Z's attack head-on. The instant their fists collided, a massive explosion of haki erupted, catching even Ain and Binz by surprise and preventing them from getting closer to the two. "You've certainly become very powerful. Much more than I could have predicted," Z admitted, surprised by Lucy's current strength. Her mastery of haki was impressive, almost inexplicable for someone to achieve in just a year and a few months. "I'm stronger than that. Don't underestimate me, Sensei," Lucy replied, keeping her fist firm against his. Bit by bit, she began to overpower him, which made Z slightly raise his eyebrows before being hurled backward. He felt the force of the impact and noticed that part of the armor on his mechanical arm was slightly dented. Z nearly fell into the sea but managed to stabilize himself, using his moonwalk to quickly lift himself into the air. He flew into the sky, while Lucy kept her eyes fixed on him, ready for his next move. Z was feeling a bit frustrated. He was supposed to begin his mission on this day, but he was already being thwarted by Lucy. As he surveyed the situation, his gaze fell on the area where the explosion had occurred, where Lucy's ship should have been docked. What he found, however, were several pieces of the broken ship, proving it had been destroyed. Even so, Lucy had managed to reach him, dodging his explosion without him noticing how. He wondered if she was alone but dismissed the thought, focusing his attention back on the ship he was on. "Ain. Binz. Attack her now," Zephyr ordered firmly. The two apprentices charged at Lucy immediately, but she simply disappeared, her skin turning pink and steaming. In just a moment, she vanished, and before the two could react, Lucy was already behind them. "As I thought, your level is far beyond expectations," murmured Zephyr as he observed the scene. He showed concern, realizing that Lucy had already reached the level of a 4 Emperor's commander, or perhaps something even worse. "No more observing. I'll have to deal with this personally," exclaimed Zephyr, charging swiftly at Lucy after she had taken down his 2 strongest apprentices. He raised his fist, preparing a devastating attack, while Lucy leapt backward to dodge. The impact of Zephyr's punch destroyed the ship's deck. Both quickly moved to the island, distancing themselves from the port to unleash their strength, as neither wanted to harm those already unconscious during their fight. Zephyr activated his mechanical arm, which grew in size as vibrant energy pulsed around it. "You won't escape this time," Zephyr shouted as his massive fist descended toward Lucy. Lucy, in turn, inflated her own fist by blowing into her thumb, coating it in armament hockey, and charged at Zephyr's blow. The clash between Lucy's giant fist and Zephyr's metallic one caused a devastating explosion, shaking the entire island. As the fight between Zephyr and Lucy intensified, Luffy watched everything from the sky. His eyes were focused on the battle, but his expression remained impassive. Looking toward the sea, he debated internally whether he should feel pity for the arrogant holy knight or not. Should I let him die in the water or not? Lucy debated. The earlier scenes were still fresh in Luffy's mind. When the Dynastone had been launched at the 7 Warlords of the Seas' ship, Luffy had acted at that moment to take the guy down once and for all. He was amusing at first, but soon became irritating, with one personality being arrogantly judgmental, wanting to kill and judge him as if he were a Tenryou Obito, while another was submissive. When the stone exploded near him, Luffy used his ability to manipulate time, briefly paralyzing the 7 Warlords of the Seas, grabbing Lucy, and flying into the sky at high speed. The subsequent explosion couldn't reach them, and no one on the other side understood what had happened. The entire ship exploded with the 7 Warlords of the Seas at the center of the blast. Now, Luffy watched from above, seeing what was left of the 7 Warlords of the Seas' ship sinking into the sea. Meanwhile, on the island, Lucy returned to her normal form. Her fists were coated in hockey as she charged at Zephyr with full force. The two exchanged blows everywhere, generating multiple explosions that made the ground tremble. The island began to suffer from the impacts of their battle. "You're playing with fire, Lucy," shouted Zephyr as he delivered a punch with his mechanical arm. "I won't let you continue your madness, Sensei," Lucy responded. The two continued to trade devastating blows, and their confrontation caused massive destruction in the area, demolishing several rocks as they crashed into the Neo-Marine base on the island. The fight continued to break through the base until they emerged outside again, colliding with each other repeatedly, moving at high speeds. At one point, Z appeared with part of his glasses shattered. Lucy, meanwhile, decided to retrieve the 7 Warlords of the Seas from the sea, though she couldn't do it there. Descending to the Neo-Marine ships as Lucy and Z moved away, Luffy grabbed one of the fallen subordinates and flew back into the sky. "Hey, you, wake up!" Luffy slapped the man's face, causing him to open his eyes abruptly. The man looked around, confused, trying to understand what was happening until he spotted Luffy. His eyes widened as he recognized him, his expression becoming even more terrified. "Listen here," Luffy said before the man could say anything. "I'm going to let you live, but only if you go to the sea and retrieve a man who's sinking there. Don't forget to put these sea stone cuffs on him. Do you understand?" As he spoke, Luffy pointed toward the sea. The man hesitated for a moment, but realizing his life was at stake, he quickly nodded. "Then go," Luffy ordered, and without hesitation, he placed the cuffs in the man's hands and pushed him toward the water. The man fell heavily into the water, screaming, but soon began swimming to complete the task Luffy had given him, believing he would die if he returned without finishing it. Suddenly, a massive explosion erupted in the middle of the island.